Yes.
The lead Supreme Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1240 of the War News stream. And today we've gotten very big news that the Russian banks are demanding emergency bailouts right now from Vladimir Putin. We're also seeing Syrian forces deployed to attack the Israeli Druze in southern Syria, and we're also seeing the U.S. develop war plans to attack Kaliningrad in a major announcement. So we have huge news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to hear significant developments that the commander of EUCOM has stated today that if the Russian Federation goes to war with NATO, they will openly encircle, destroy, and capture all Russian forces in Kaliningrad in such a short period of time that it will nullify any Russian plans or attempts to close the Suwayda Gap, making an open and clear evident threat to the Russian armed forces and to the Russian government's attempt to continue to threaten the stability or the sovereignty of countries inside of Eastern Europe that are currently a part of NATO's eastern frontier. Outside of that news, we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is facing steady financial collapse, as multiple Russian Federation banks have reached out to the Russian government in the low-key communication efforts to attempt to reach some sort of an agreement with the Russian government for some form of a financial bailout, considering that interest rates have now reached 20% and that the Russian banks have been forced to make incredibly bad financial decisions and loans to Russian companies that are vital for the Russian war industry and war efforts to keep rolling and to maintain some limited level of economic stability. The Russian government has responded in turn by approving the printing of 15 trillion rubles inside the Russian Federation's Bureau of Printing and Engraving, which will most likely start to begin a complete financial and economic collapse here within the near future. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that Ukrainian armed forces have continued to strike targets within the area south of the city of Tula, hitting a chemical plant earlier today and causing significant damage through the drone attacks attacks that were conducted in that region. We have also been able to hear outside of that the Druze people are continuously under attack as a Syrian Tribal Army is now being amassed inside of the Syrian Interim government and is now racing 70,000 strong into the area of the Suwayda government. Firefights are now breaking out throughout the entirety of the city, and we have been able to hear that the same crimes against humanity that were being conducted by the SIG army forces is now being conducted by the Syrian Tribal Army, largely an extension of the Syrian Interim government's centralized forces. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear of unidentified explosions once again breaking out inside the city of Tehran in Iran, and we've also been able to hear of low-level coercion efforts and an official Russian threat that there could be a resulting escalation due to US-Japanese military exercises which are currently being conducted inside of the Sea of Japan. We have also been able to hear more news out of the United States at this moment that is once again keying us in at least to some critical information about US foreign policy stances around the world, and not only that, particularly on the situation developing in Syria. We have major news coming from quite literally around the entirety of the world once again tonight. And of course, we want to make sure to get y'all out all of the major news that has been happening over the past 24 hours. There has been some incredibly large pieces of news, and once again, it does appear that the United States is beginning to strengthen its posturing in Eastern Europe at the moment, and is once again continuously starting to show a position of strength against the Russian Federation as the 50-day deadline to reach a peace in the war in Ukraine is now starting to count down. Moving us on into the area of the Kaliningrad Oblast, or more so the important statements that the United States made earlier today about the Russian Federation's involvement with the possibility of a greater conflict within Eastern Europe, we have been able to hear statements made by the EUCOM Commander of US forces and NATO forces within the region that this would not go well. At least according to the commander of US ground forces in Europe and Africa, and I quote, "NATO has a plan to quickly destroy the Kaliningrad region in the event of a military threat from Russia." We also were able to hear a further, larger quote from the European and African forces commander in this statement that was also made as well. As the US commander of NATO LANCOM and US Army Europe and Africa forces, General Christopher Donahue, stated that NATO forces would be able to neutralize Russia's A2AD capabilities in the Kaliningrad exclave from the ground in a time frame that is unheard of and faster than we've ever been able to do. And another quote, "We have already planned that, and we've already developed it. The mass and momentum problem that Russia poses to us, we've developed the capability to make sure that we can stop that mass and momentum problem," according to Donahue. In more diplomatic terms, what he is saying is that we will largely cut them up, and then also take the Kaliningrad Oblast pretty quickly if a major ground conflict began within the region of Eastern Europe. This is a significant threat that has not only been leveraged against the Russian forces inside of Kaliningrad, which at this moment are nearly 400 to 500,000 strong, but it is also a greater threat to the Russian Federation's government and their larger ambitions throughout the entirety of Eastern Europe, at least at this moment. We have seen that over the past several years, the Russian Federation's continuous aggressive statements against Eastern European nations and their continuing acts of aggression have largely been unmet by any sort of an equal escalation or equal escalatory threat by the Western world or NATO in the attempt to defend their national sovereignty or the sovereignty of their member states within the eastern frontier. This is the first statement that we've ever actually seen, at least here recently, that is showing that the United States EUCOM forces are at least starting to take the situation incredibly seriously and are making it openly known publicly that the United States of America, along with NATO forces in general as a coalition, would not only be able to counter an attempted Russian push in the Suwalki Gap, but to also destroy it completely and turn the tide nearly immediately, pushing the Russians right back into Kaliningrad and also capturing the Oblast in its entirety. This is a significant shift from prior U.S. statements and U.S. forces actions that have been occurring under EUCOM Command, as we have seen that in the past, while EUCOM commanders and NATO commanders have been stating that the Russians do pose a risk far off into the future within the next 5 years, no one has ever made a concerted statement that they have military plans in place to neutralize and destroy large elements of the Russian armed forces if such a war was to break out. This comment is actually one of the first. Not only that, it is also showing us that the United States of America is responding directly, at least through Commander General Donahue earlier today, to the Russian developments that have been going on, at least on a strategic level, in preparations for a larger war with NATO. I always have to show
honestly,
this.
It honestly seems like there's probably something more behind the scenes about it, because I see some people in the live chat saying it's just one guy running his mouth and making threats toward Russia. But this is a very important guy here. He's not just like some random guy. He's the commander of the area. So, I mean, this is a pretty important fella here to make those statements. So, in my opinion, it sounds like there's something else going on that prompted him to even make that wild statement.
And I would have to agree. It is a very significant sort of a statement that was made today. And not only that, it is also starting to show us, at least at the moment, that the Russian Federation, or at least the concept of a war with the Russian Federation, is becoming an inevitable certainty. We also have to understand that the Leningrad Military District was recently created in 2024 with the large understanding that it is a military district specialized in purpose to be able to go to war with the NATO frontier. The Leningrad Military District is the only military district in the existent Russian Federation that shares its border entirely with NATO forces, as opposed to the Moscow Military District, the Southern Military District, the Central and Eastern Military Districts, which all do not border any NATO countries or forces at any given point, meaning that the Leningrad Military District was reshaped out of the Central or Western Military District specifically to deal with the rising planning, at least within the Russian government, of an inevitable war with NATO. This action is also starting to show us, at least in the Leningrad Military District's force composition, that this force is more so poised for offensive actions. Really quickly, to list off at least the official units that are in the Leningrad Military District, it is significant, at least from what we can tell. Just to give off the larger names, the 6th Combined Arms Army, the 44th Army Corps, the 11th Army Corps, as well as the 7th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Regiment, which is generally considered to be a more well-off unit currently inside the Russian Federation and has largely remained intact through most of the conflict, not seeing a lot of involvement in the Ukraine war so far, and also the 14th Army Corps based in Murmansk are all a part of the Leningrad Military District. Each one of these corps and armies, or the Combined Arms Army as a whole, are incredibly significant in their abilities and their potency from what we could generally understand, at least on paper. Most of these are made up of significantly sized artillery brigades, motor rifle divisions, and other significant elements of the Russian armed forces, which would largely be seen at least in a offensive setting. The fact that there is a large integration of artillery brigade units inside the Leningrad Military District is indicating to us that the structure of the Leningrad Military District is not defensive in nature, it is entirely offensive, as we generally do understand that artillery in mass amounts is used for offensive actions for a country that is preparing to go to war. Such things could similarly be seen in the Iran-Iraq War, as both Iran and Iraq built up significant artillery forces to try and conduct offensives into the other's territory, and later on, those same artillery forces would be used by Saddam's armies of Iraq to invade and occupy Kuwait and then attempt a fight against U.S. forces during Operation Desert Storm in the Gulf War of 1991. The Russian Federation also has a significant amount of artillery systems that could be used against the NATO forces if they were to try a larger conflict. Not only that, the Leningrad Military District does encompass the Kaliningrad Oblast, a Russian exclave that is sandwiched between Lithuania and Poland and strategically placed directly across from the Suwalki Gap, a around 40-mile wide stretch that connects the NATO states of the Baltics to the NATO state of Poland. This is an incredibly important area as far as NATO is concerned, and this is generally the weak point that we are currently seeing in Europe that is similar to the Fulda Gap that would have been seen during the Cold War in between East and West Germany. The Suwalki Gap is what could be described as a bottleneck or a linchpin for NATO forces, as this specific area only has 2 major highways traveling through it to Kaunas and Vilnius, and not only that, a minimal amount of railroad infrastructure exists within this area. If the Russian Federation was able to threaten this region either with direct capture or through artillery forces, they could cut off the entirety of the Baltic states from any reinforcements or resupplies of munitions and supplies from the greater NATO alliance, meaning that the Baltic states would largely be cut off at the beginning of the conflict, and it would be an uphill battle from there to be able to deal with the Russian offensives in that region. The fact that the European Forces Commander General Donahue stated that the United States and NATO generally has a plan to neutralize and largely destroy the Kaliningrad Oblast from the outset of that conflict is largely putting Russia's greatest asset into jeopardy with that direct threat and statement, once again showing that the United States of America and NATO will directly neutralize and destroy Russia's main benefit or largely shining I guess you could say, key to winning at least the opening of a conflict like that, because if the United States can neutralize the threat to the Suwalki Gap that exists through Kaliningrad, that means the Russian Federation's forces throughout the Baltics will not be able to advance with great rapidity and speed, considering that they'll be dealing with a force that is fighting against time, expending vital munitions with every passing day of the battle, and supplies that they would not be able to get largely resupplied quickly enough to be able to deal with the advancing Russian forces. If Kaliningrad is destroyed, that would not be the picture. Those forces would still be resupplied and replenished at their normal rates, meaning that the Russian advances through Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania would be far slower than expected. This is all putting together a picture, at least from the European Forces Commander today, that NATO is already prepared through its planning just at the moment right now to be able to neutralize and destroy any Russian armed forces that attempt a war against NATO. And through this direct threat, is signaling to the Russian Federation that a war against NATO not only is a crapshoot, it is an absolute disaster if the Russian Federation even attempted such a concept. But nevertheless,
one thing I'm a little curious about here, because he didn't really provide too many details around his threats to invade and destroy Kaliningrad. But what is the exact plan here? Is the U.S. and NATO going to attack Kaliningrad preemptively if they detect that Russia is going to launch a war, or is it going to be after Russia attacks a Baltic state, then they'll invade Kaliningrad, destroy it, and then take it over and basically occupy the space? What is actually the plan here?
From what we generally understand based on the wording from General Donahue, it appears to largely be a statement, and just to read right here exactly what we have, I'll just read you all the entire transcript so that way y'all can get a little bit of a better idea. And I'll just read the direct quotes as well. I won't read any of the filler. We know what we have to develop and use, and the use case that we're using is you have to deter from the ground. The land domain is not becoming less important, it's becoming more important, and you now have to take down anti-access aerial denial A2AD bubbles from the ground. You can now take over sea from the ground, all of those things we are watching happen in Ukraine. And moving on from that, another quote that Donahue made was, take that down from the ground in a time frame that is unheard of and faster than we've ever been able to do. We've already planned that, and we've already developed it. The massive momentum problem that the Russians pose to us, we've developed the capability to make sure that we can stop that mass and momentum problem. He also went on to state, we already know exactly what we have to do with Cloud, and we know exactly the type of actual unmanned systems, brigades, everything else that we need for that. Largely showing that, at least at the moment, speaking as generally the commander of NATO land forces, that he is stating that in the event of a Russian attack, they will be able to neutralize most of their advantageous offensive abilities that are at least perceived at the moment right now, and immediately counter them by destroying a great deal of their air defense, creating air superiority off of the bat, and then pretty much destroying the Russian ground forces from the skies above. That's generally
That sounds pretty ambitious, honestly, because the way he's saying it is, it sounds like he has a really rapid attack plan to go into Kaliningrad, wipe out the defenses like very quickly, and then rapidly take it. But my thing is this, though. Kaliningrad, to my understanding, is extremely fortified. They've got all kinds of air defense systems. That place is a very, very strong military bastion. It's literally militarized to the extreme. So, I mean, taking it super quick, like now I get the fact that once Kaliningrad is cut off from supplies, Kaliningrad's in big trouble over a longer period of time. For example, like days or weeks. They can't get reinforcements. They can't get more shipments. It'll be very hard to get that because they're surrounded by NATO countries. But at the same time, though, with it being so heavily fortified, it seems like I'm not really sure, obviously, what their plans are. Nobody knows that. But it seems like it would have to be a very strong attack, a very, very strong attack, to simply just take it super quick, rapidly, and be done with it.
To really speak quickly, at least from what I can understand off of what what General Donahue is largely saying at the moment, and to also show y'all some of the military bases, or at least basing areas that are throughout the Kaliningrad region, this is a map right here that was actually provided that shows every single base and facility throughout the entirety of the Kaliningrad Oblast. These are somewhat important to note because, primarily, if y'all notice, most of them are centralized around the Kaliningrad city area, mostly towards the coastline. This is something significant to remember, and at least to note it right now at this moment, because if the Russian forces inside of Kaliningrad were to conduct an offensive, they are most likely going to be advancing rapidly to take the Suwalki Gap, or at least advancing down the highway towards Elk, and then advancing northwards towards Suwalki to try and take this entire area. We do know that the Russian army has a great deal of difficulty, much like any other armed force, with advancing through forest fields and open farm plains, if you want to describe it that way, as that could bog down the tanks and armor and greatly reduce the speed and rapidity at which that offensive is able to advance. For this reason, they would most likely keep to the highways themselves and attempt to rapidly advance down them to make it to the city of Suwalki. With that in mind, most Russian forces would be centralized or focused on their offensive axes further off to the eastern side of Kaliningrad, and specifically towards Suwalki. However, most of their bases that would be providing any form of air defense for those forces, or any air defense at all, even in the eastern areas, are based out of the Kaliningrad city area over here to the west, in between the city of Kaliningrad and largely Baltiysk, directly along the coastline on the Baltiysk Peninsula. For this reason, the NATO actually has a very decent position. Poland is a military juggernaut, and it would be incredibly difficult for the Russian Federation to start a large sweeping advance across the coastline and into the very heart of Poland itself, even with the large force they have present inside of Kaliningrad, meaning that they will focalize their forces in Suwalki. This means that most, if not all, Russian military bases would only be about 32 miles away from NATO attacks, either through HIMARS or other forms of longer-range artillery systems that will be able to reach into the Kaliningrad Oblast and not only target the air defense systems, but also other vital systems, including the Russian Air Force that is present in Kaliningrad, that could conduct air interdiction missions to largely stop NATO from declaring air superiority. With this in mind, and what General Donahue is largely saying, they're saying that they actually wouldn't be attempting to achieve air superiority outright through a battle in the skies, but largely from the ground itself, much like Ukraine has done throughout the war. As a matter of fact, he's gone on to state, at least in these current statements, that NATO would be able to have enough long-range artillery forces to target and destroy just about every single air interdiction system in Kaliningrad from the ground in a ground-to-ground attack, most likely with GMLRS missiles fired from M142 or M270 MLRS systems. With that in mind, most of Russia's air defense abilities in Kaliningrad could be destroyed outright within the opening days of the conflict, as multiple MLRS units could fire pretty much endlessly until those air defense batteries are wiped out entirely. And that means that the Russian offensive inside of Suwalki has provided no air defense cover, and not only that, the entirety of the Kaliningrad Oblast is not provided any air defense cover either, meaning that NATO could actually pick off all of Russia's most, I guess you could say, profound offensive abilities from the air, and largely leave the weaker units for the NATO ground forces to sweep up as they move their offensive into the Kaliningrad Oblast itself, pretty much nullifying any Russian attempt at a successful capture of the Suwalki Gap, or at least a long-term holding of the Suwalki Gap, and they would be able to break that siege or encirclement of the Baltics rapidly or quickly, or stop it entirely before it was able to even coalesce.
Well, see, that's my thing right there, though. The amount of forces it's going to take, even with NATO's power, it's going to take a lot of forces to go into Kaliningrad and just quickly, rapidly wipe the place out and attack it, destroy the Russian forces, and occupy the space. That's going to take a lot of resources. And at the same time, the trigger for that, the trigger for attacking Kaliningrad and doing this NATO plan is being developed here, is that the Baltics are being attacked. So we are basically pouring tons of resources into Kaliningrad. Meanwhile, the Baltics are being attacked by Putin. So it seems like we're putting a lot of resources in one little small spot, which is Kaliningrad, and sort of neglecting the actual invading spot, which would be Latvia, Lithuania, or one of those, Estonia, made the Baltic states there. So it seems like a bit of an issue on that front with the rapid attack plan. Also, another thing is there has been rumors that Russia's storing nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad. I'm not sure if there's been any official corroboration of that, but there has been allegedly seen on satellite footage showing nuclear storage sites in Kaliningrad. It's unclear if they're actually storing them there, but that would be another pretty big concern if there are nukes actively being stored in that small little area.
There may be nuclear weapons, most likely of a tactical variety, that are stored inside of Kaliningrad, but largely speaking on a defensive level, if the Russian Federation started an offensive, NATO's top priority, as it usually is the top priority of every conflict, is to maintain a strategically viable setting, meaning that supplies are able to keep flowing to forces inside the Baltics and keep them at least fighting or operating. If NATO's forces were entirely based along the Russian border in the Baltics, and then the Russians just marched straight into Suwalki and took it, everyone in the Baltics is screwed. It's pretty much a similar situation to the one that the British found themselves in with the small French force that they were at Dunkirk, where they're completely surrounded and encircled, because while the British forces had a very strong position along the border inside of Belgium or in Belgium itself, the French positions near to the Argonne Forest were completely abandoned, and for that reason, the Germans were able to simply punch through and then conduct an encirclement. And that would be the exact kind of situation that you would see if NATO forces entirely focused on the defense of Latvia and Estonia, is that it would be near suicidal. Russian forces would simply encircle them at the Suwalki Gap and then destroy them outright, meaning that NATO's real battle to fight in the Baltics isn't in the Baltic states themselves, it's actually inside of the Suwalki Gap in Poland. If that gap is ever closed off and the Russians have complete access of it, it doesn't matter if you have 1 million men inside the Baltic states, they are bound to lose at that point, because resupplying them consistently would be incredibly difficult. Not only that, if you didn't deal with a small Russian flotilla inside the Baltic Peninsula, which you can actually see housed right here, they could start to cause a great deal of havoc for the NATO forces that would be attempting to resupply NATO's armed forces through the Baltic ports of Riga, Tallinn, or Klaipeda, just north of Kaliningrad. For that reason, destroying Russia's forces in Kaliningrad is vital to NATO defensive doctrine, and is really where NATO's forces should be focusing most of their efforts, because if they do not focus them there, the war in the Baltics is pretty much lost from the outset, because the flanks were not secure, and pretty much all NATO forces in the Baltics were able to be completely surrounded and then destroyed in detail by the Russians, considering that there would be no easy way to evacuate or remove any of those forces at that point. So it's a fairly important sort of a strategy that's being put forward, and this honestly is the best strategy that could be put forward, at least in my opinion. But nevertheless, a lot of people are talking at the moment about the United States, or largely General Donahue of the US NATO LANCOM forces, threatening to capture and destroy Kaliningrad if the Russians were to go to war, and to do it so quickly and rapidly that the Russians' attempt to even close off the Suwalki Gap would be pointless or futile. And a lot of people have been putting in their opinions on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So it looks like 47% of the audience said it means war with Russia is very, very close, while 33% says just a general statement by the U.S. officials, and 14% said I need more context to figure out exactly why this was said. And I think at this point, we've pretty much gone over the context, so that's pretty much established at this point. So I would say the fact that that statement is being made out in the public, and once again, this commander would not say this unless he had permission to make this statement. This is such a wildly aggressive statement that it had to be sanctioned by officials. It couldn't have been something he just said on his own. I would highly doubt that. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think he would be in some trouble if he went out and just said that on his own accord. So I have a feeling it is a state-sponsored statement from NATO, and that's probably why he said it. So I'm with the 47%. It means that war with Russia is getting closer. It's not imminent necessarily, but it is getting closer, because for a statement like this and this type of aggression to be made about taking Kaliningrad, which is somewhere extremely important to Russia and very fortified militarily, things must be getting hot behind closed doors, because that's a wild statement to make in the public, knowing that the Russians will respond to it and probably use that to escalate. So I'm definitely with the 47%. I think war is getting close. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be with the 47% as well. Such a statement is largely starting to show us that war may be getting to a closer reality than expected, and these sorts of threats are supposed to make the Russians think twice and largely start to use psychological warfare against Russian command or decision-making, or pretty much get inside of their heads to make them think that this might not be a foolproof idea like they were originally anticipating. I did see someone really quickly in the chat ask, do the Russians have any submarines that are present inside of Kaliningrad? And from what we generally understand, the answer to that would be yes. There is a flotilla of the Baltic Fleet that is stationed inside the city of Baltisk, which is on the Baltisk Peninsula, which is a very special sort of a geographic feature of Kaliningrad, as the Baltisk Peninsula has direct access to the Vistula Lagoon and allows for further access into the city of Kaliningrad, which does have some port infrastructure, which allows for some limited amounts of intermodal traffic, which you can see right here, and other cargo traffic. The small flotilla of the Baltic Fleet that is present here does apparently, on satellite, from what I can tell, at least have 1 Kilo class submarine that is stationed in this area, which is a diesel-electric submarine. There may also be more, and we also have to remember that the Russian Federation does have the ability to send forth any submarines that are based at the island of Kronstadt, which also does house some Russian submarines of the main Baltic Fleet, which is stationed out of the island of Kronstadt. that. If these submarines break out into the Baltic, they can pose a difficult problem and a challenge for NATO resupply efforts inside of the Baltic, meaning that it will be a lot more of a secure sort of a route for supplies to be able to transport them over land into the Baltic states than by sea, as these submarines could pose a significant threat. And not only that, leaving significant amounts of NATO naval assets inside the Baltic Sea could also be a bit of a challenge, especially considering that anti-ship batteries are based inside of Kaliningrad, and these anti-ship batteries have about a 350-mile range, meaning that they're actually able to reach out all the way into the Strait of Denmark. These ships would literally be engaging anti-ship batteries at near point-blank ranges, meaning that supply from sea would be even more pressingly difficult. And once again, making it clear that dealing with the Kaliningrad threat is something that has to be dealt with by land inside of Poland for the large part, through long-range artillery forces once again. So for that reason, I would have to say that this is showing that war is getting near, and I'd also have to say that at least with the general statements that were made by General Donahue earlier today, this is putting a great deal of faith in me in current NATO planning. It is not showing that they are naive or stupid. Of course, the Western world, or specifically the United States, has never really been known to be incredibly naive or stupid in most battle planning. Usually we're well ahead of the game, and understanding that Kaliningrad is a major threat to the entirety of the NATO alliance and is pretty much the enemy in the rear as far as we would be concerned in a battle with the greater Russian Federation at large, it's good to see that they are prioritizing a battle plan or strategy that would see the elimination of Russian air defense and anti-ship batteries inside of Kaliningrad, and also the capture of the oblast as fast as possible to make sure that it does not pose a threat to NATO supply lines traveling into the Baltics and the defensive forces that we would see inside of the Baltic states during that kind of a conflict. But I also would have to say that the statement alone is showing that war is getting near, and that we're most likely also going to be seeing that NATO forces will continue to ramp up, much like we've seen through many NATO states, their military preparations hastily, as considering that these statements are being made and they've never really been made before, there's a decent chance in the background that some intelligence or information is coming through that war is becoming even more likely. And that's why we're seeing that military commanders like these are even feeling comfortable or getting the authorization to make public statements like those. But still, a very interesting development nonetheless, and it is showing us that the United States of America and NATO are openly stating that they are prepared for whatever may be coming down the pipe, or more so, whatever they're going to be putting down the Russians' pipe. Outside of that, we aren't going to be moving on from the Kaliningrad Oblast and the greater American threat to the Kaliningrad Oblast made today, and we are going to be moving on into the Russian Federation, because while Russia has been pissing off NATO forces enough that we're issuing a direct threat to pretty much wipe everyone out in Kaliningrad, it appears that the Russians are wiping out their bank accounts a little bit quicker than can be accounted for at the moment, as we are starting to hear that apparently the Russian banks are starting to ask for bailouts. Many of y'all have been able to hear of the continuous growth of Russian financial troubles throughout the years, and it does appear that these are starting to once again reach their significant head again, where Russian banks are teetering on the near point of collapse, as Bloomberg has shown that 3 major Russian banks are quietly asking for bailouts due to bad loans piling up. Interest rates have reached 20%, and people in the country simply cannot keep up. The state is even pressuring banks not to report defaults to avoid any kind of financial panic. It shows what Geo Insider has been saying, and many people inside the analytical world have been saying, the wartime economy is keeping Russia alive for now, but the cracks are starting to show. If Russia ended the war right now, they would truly collapse. If they keep the war going, they can survive a little bit longer. It also does appear that because of this, the Russian Federation has taken the most drastic financial action that we have seen so far in the war. The Russian Central Bank has officially approved the printing of 15 trillion rubles to be planted immediately into the Russian economy to attempt to uphold the Russian financial system, at least temporarily. This is.
But doesn't that make inflation worse though? I thought printing money and introducing more currency into the supply of the economy, that actually worsens inflation. That doesn't make it better.
This is true, but this is also usually a last-ditch attempt by most countries to try and financially keep alive. Because while it doesn't make any financial sense at all, if a country is seeing that they're in a last-ditch attempt at survival, they usually will start these sorts of money-printing operations en masse to be able to just try and find some way to fund the military operations while the economy goes wildly out of control. This is something that we've actually seen in multiple countries in the past. To quickly bring up two that were significant failures, the Confederate States of America and Nazi Germany significantly increased the amount of at least in the Confederacy, I believe it was Confederate currency notes, which were actually issued by the state governments, not by a centralized government because it was a Confederacy. And then by the Germans in World War II, it was actually the significant increase of Reichsmarks that they were producing and printing, so that way they could try and keep the Russian not the Russian military, but their militaries alive and fighting up until the final moment. As far as the domestic economy goes, this is going to cause rapid inflation. And not only that, this is going to cause an even worse developing financial situation, although there is more money pretty much floating around out there. This is devaluing the ruble. We all know that the ruble is extremely devalued at the moment. 1 ruble is about worth 1 penny inside the United States, so practically worthless. But putting another 15 trillion rubles into the Russian economy is only going to make that even worse. Not only that, it's going to devalue the currency that a lot of people have a hold of currently, citizens and companies alike, and this is going to make their money stretch less farther. However, considering that the Russian government is the one largely printing this currency, this will be giving the Russian Federation the ability to throw around this worthless money wherever they need, and at least give them the financial ability to keep paying for equipment and materials vital to the production of war industries and vital to the upkeep of the Russian army that's fighting in Ukraine right now. This is the sign of a dying country, though. Do not be mistaken. There is no other way to look at this. Russia's economy is actually collapsing at this point. These sorts of things come at the very end of a collapse. When Nazi Germany started to pour out money out the wazoo, this was near to mid-1944. They were pretty much dead at that point. The Confederacy in the United States Civil War also started to do this around the latter part of generally actually the latter part of 1863, but significantly during the middle part of 1864. Once again, a dying country by that point, as General Sherman's March to the Sea was happening in mid-1864, and the Confederacy was seeing that it was being split into multiple pieces, and the military and economic situation was rapidly imploding by that point, much like Nazi Germany's was by 1944. So with this in mind, it's showing that the Russian economy is also starting to financially implode, and while this is incredibly concerning, this is something that we're actually looking for. If the Russian economy collapses, the war is over. Like, just to make that incredibly clear at this point, this is the way the war is won, is by seeing the complete depletion of financial resources in Russia. If Russia does not have the money to finance a war, they cannot have a war. The war ends. It's over at that point. So while it's an incredible... Go ahead.
Also, by the way, I was trying to do a translation here to see exactly what 15 trillion rubles is in US dollars. That's roughly about 193 billion USD. So even in US money, that's still a lot of money they're starting to print right there. That's a hell of a lot, actually. But my question is, what is the plan to distribute this money? Because unless they're just printing the money to simply use it for solely the government to purchase things, like, for example, more military equipment, more social services, or whatever they're needing to do to support their government, it's not like they're planning on handing this out to civilians, because civilians can't just like go borrow money. The borrowing rate right now, the interest rate in Russia is still above 20%. So they can't borrow money. They can't afford it. So I don't understand what is the logic behind printing $193 billion, because, nobody's going to benefit from it except for just the government. And it's going to be a very short-term benefit.
It's better than nothing, though, because at least in the government's mind, there's no way for them to get any more money. They've pretty much bled the Russian turnip dry. The only way they can get more money now is at the expense of literally the whole country by just printing the money and then using it that way, which devalues the currency rapidly, but at the same time, it still gives Russia, the Russian government at least, the free currency necessary to be able to still make those financial transactions that keeps the army fighting. That's generally what they're doing at the moment. It's suicidal by economic terms, but it is something that will keep them going for just that little extra bit longer on a governmental level or governmental aspect.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea because, like you're saying, the inflation is going to go through the roof, which means the Russian civilians, which are already struggling, like I said, they can't borrow money. They can't afford to even borrow money at this point. So they can't get a vehicle. They can't even borrow money to make it past this month that they can't afford like rent and things like that. They're screwed. And now they're going to reduce the Russian citizens' buying power dramatically with introducing this massive new currency influx into their economy. So now they're reducing the already low buying power of the Russian civilians. So the Russian people, like honestly, at some point, I'm wondering, when are the Russian civilians going to get sick of this and actually say something? Because of course they're scared of falling out of a window. Like, that's obvious. They're scared of Putin. But at the same time, if your alternative is to go and starve to death because you can't afford to buy food and you can't afford to put a roof over your head, it seems like the risk analysis sort of starts weighing toward maybe an overthrow of the Putin regime eventually, because the people start getting so malnutrition and basically abused by Putin based on these actions right here that they can't take it anymore.
I think that that might actually end up becoming a reality. Also, I saw someone say really quickly, and this is true, that the Weimar Republic, which was the predecessor state to Nazi Germany, actually did suffer hyperinflation as well, and it generally was the Weimar Republic that did, and not World War II Germany. That is true, but at the end of World War II, the Nazi Germans also started to suffer hyperinflation as well, although they had a great deal of economic safeguards in place that generally stopped any kind of hyperinflation. The German state was pretty much collapsing at that point. American forces were starting to advance across the Rhine, well, not even across the Rhine, well, actually, technically, they were by that point. They were crossing the Rhine in the Netherlands into the Ruhrland inside of Germany, and not only that, Soviet forces were starting to enter East Prussia near to what's modern day Kaliningrad by that point. Not only that, they were starting to see the complete loss of any kind of resources of any type throughout the entirety of Germany. And so while they had a lot of economic safeguards in place, because of the lack of resources, there pretty much was a form of hyperinflation that set in. Because while you had the money, there were simply just not enough resources available. And so the money started to rapidly degrade in its value because you had to spend a whole lot more to find anything. Also, something else important to note, at least from a historical perspective, is that Nazi Germany never had a rationing protocol in World War II. They were the only country that didn't, and it was disastrous because by the end of the war, most people couldn't even find any basic food items because they were never rationed. So people in Germany would just hoard them, or hoard them. Weird pronunciation I said there, but they would just hoard them. So most of the time, you couldn't find any sort of meat, you couldn't find any sort of form of agricultural products, or anything for that matter. But once again, that was the reason for hyperinflation, at least at the end of World War II in Nazi Germany. And it was not really the same in the Confederacy. The Confederacy did the stupid trick that the Russians are doing right now. They said, well, if we can't sell cotton to the French and the British, we'll just print money. And they started printing it a lot. And then the government started to spend it a lot. And then that's what led to hyperinflation, because you could find the Confederate dollar in an outhouse at that point, and people were using it as toilet paper because it was literally that worthless. As a matter of fact, at the end of the war, when the Battle of Petersburg was being fought just south of Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy, people were saying that it looked like the city of Richmond was on fire. And it wasn't because the Confederates were burning their own city down, it's because they were literally burning giant bonfires of Confederate dollars to try and battle inflation, or hyperinflation that had set in at that point, by pretty much artificially controlling the amount of Confederate dollars or Confederate banknotes that were in circulation at that point. Just to give you all a little bit of an idea of how the financial side of war works. But that's something that the Russians, like, they might be dealing with here incredibly soon as well, either way. But still, it's a desperate situation for the Russians. This right here is truly the death warrant of the Russian Federation, this issuance of this decree that allows for the printing of an extra 15 trillion rubles. But outside of that, a lot of people have also been talking about that. With the issuance of this death warrant, for the large part economically, can the Russians survive any longer? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So to reiterate one more time, the reason why the Russian banks are making these emergency bailout requests to Putin is because they're experiencing major defaults on loans that they've given to the Russian civilians. And apparently, not only are civilians defaulting, but also some businesses in Russia are also defaulting as well. So when businesses start doing that and they can't make the payments on their loans, the bank has to eat it. And then the bank starts having issues, and that's when they request a government bailout. So that's why they're currently doing this. But it looks like about 48% of the audience said Russia cannot last much longer, while 35% said Russia will cook the books even some more, and 12% said it's a 50-50 chance of collapse. And we're already seeing the evidence here that Russia is already starting to cook the books like Ratatouille in the kitchen at this point. They are going crazy on cooking the books. They're trying to tell the banks to cover it up. Don't tell anybody about it. Keep it quiet. They're also out here basically gaslighting the entire Russian public into believing that everything's perfectly fine. But in the background, though, the Russian banks are begging Vladimir Putin for help, and Putin really can't help them. His version of help is let's start printing money like crazy, and that's not going to help them. That's going to end up killing everybody in Russia because they're not going to be able to afford to live. So I'm going to say Russia can't last much longer. This has been a long time coming, and it's hard to predict exactly when it's going to implode on itself, but it's going to implode at some point unless Russia gets some form of outside help, like from China or maybe another country. It's going to implode eventually. It just can't keep going this way with Russia on a shoestring budget. It's just impossible. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would be with the 48%. The Russians cannot last much longer. The fact that they are now issuing orders to just print the money to make it exist shows that they can't cook books any longer. The books have been cooked to the point that they're cooked well done. They're burnt at this point, and they're going to have to go and find a way to just keep the war going as long as they can, although it's inevitably going to end. They just don't have the financial ability to keep it rolling anymore. So with that in mind, this is showing they can't last a lot longer. It's largely dead on the nail as far as the analysis goes. Maybe another year or two, it's going to financially be over. They just can't keep it going for that much longer, unless if they got some form of significant foreign support. Maybe from the Chinese, but we haven't seen that the Chinese appear to be that apt to financially bankroll the entire Russian state yet, and I'm not really sure if they'd really want to, at least at the moment. So we would have to see.
Although, if China senses World War III is around the corner and they need an ally in their corner, and Russia is pretty much their only ally they've got in a major sense, they probably might bankroll Russia just to keep the government stable, because the government is basically an apparatus to keep the military organized right now. So they can keep the individuals in the military organized, and therefore Putin can basically be the de facto controller of all those troops that China can then use to their advantage and leverage that to help win if they were in a world war scenario. So they might bankroll them just for that reason, because if the Russian government collapses and there's chaos in Russia, it's going to be extremely hard to make them organized enough to even be of any assistance militarily if China found themselves in a bad position. So I personally am of the belief that China would help Russia. I know we've had this debate before, but I think they would help them just for that reason, just because they need a buddy, and they'll basically pay to play to keep that buddy in the game because they have nobody else.
They might. I don't think that's completely out of the picture at all. There's a decent possibility the Chinese might actually support the Russians financially and bankroll them. But considering how bad off the Russians are right now, even if the Chinese tried to bankroll them, it might be too late. Because if the Russians start to spend this money right now, they're going to start causing hyperinflation. It's not going to be manageable inflation. And really quickly, I saw some people always try and misconstrue many things, and I'll clear up a misconception that some people said. People said, well, in America, we print money too. But the thing is, though, is that when we print $2 trillion out of the blue, it doesn't really have that much of an impact. And while it did, we cooked the books well enough that the inflation actually happened somewhat slowly. Still, inflation did happen, and it has not been good. We are suffering the consequences of that in the present day right now, with the higher prices of literally everything in the country. Still, it wasn't incredibly bad. With Russia already bleeding their economic turnip dry, with companies like Rostelmash shutting down pretty much and saying there's apocalyptic economic conditions, and other major companies, even economic monoliths like Gazprom, Lukoil, and others laying off nearly half of their employees already in years prior, it's showing that they're not in the kind of economic situation where they could just, we'll just cook the books and everything will be fine. They've already been doing that for years. They're at the very end of their ropes right now. This isn't something that's being done to go, let's try and balance the economy during what is pretty much a plague of old, like we did. This is something where we have been fighting a war for 3.5 years. The country, resource-wise, is completely spent. Monetarily, it's completely spent. The sanctions are crippling us. And at this point, this is the last resort that we have to try and keep this untenable economic situation going for just a little while longer. That's the situation that they're in. Completely different than what the United States does when we were printing the money out of the blue. Because, once again, the United States was not in a life or death war pretty much at that point when we were printing the money, and we weren't in a situation where the government was spending more than they ever could bring in taxes on war, to put it that way. So Also, another thing is that we can also lend from foreign banks. And that's something that's a little bit more significant because the Russians really can't do that right now because they've been removed from the SWIFT banking system. So, pretty much any kind of foreign lending that they could have done to financially keep themselves running for a lot longer, it's gone. It's disappeared. They don't even have the ability to do that. And not only that, their credit score, as far as the country was concerned, was incredibly low. So they couldn't really lend in the first place. And then getting them knocked out of the SWIFT banking system ensured they certainly wouldn't be able to loan significant amounts of money from foreign countries to keep their war running. So all of those things have significant impacts on their ability to finance the war. And I also see some other people talking about whether or not the economics is what's important in a war. And this is something that a lot of people don't know about war. War isn't about soldiers on the field shooting at each other or hitting each other with artillery. It's a very big part of a war. But the more important part of the war is the industrial side of things, the supply side of things. And that also includes money. Money is a measurable supply that is used in war. And to win a war, it isn't really about how well trained your army is, how big your army is. Really, the most important thing is how financially stable your country is, and how much resources can they domestically produce, and how much extra resources can they buy with the money they have available. That's actually what wins wars. Whenever you look at any war since the US Civil War being included, and you look at who won those conflicts, it wasn't all about who had the better army in the field. It was about who could outspend and outproduce the other side. And in every single war, it generally has been, except for the asymmetrical wars, the ones where a country was able to outspend and outproduce another. The Union won the Civil War because they were able to outspend and outproduce the Confederacy in every measurable metric. The First World War was won by the Allies because we were able to outspend and outproduce the Ottomans, the Germans, and the Austro-Hungarians every single day of the week. But really quickly, I'm actually going to break from that because we actually have breaking news coming out of Syria at this moment. So what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so I don't mean to do a whiplash here and jump onto a different segment of the news real quick, but we do have some potentially breaking news coming out of Syria right this minute. I do want to get everybody up to date real quick. Currently, there is obviously some massive escalations happening in Syria between the Israelis and the Syrian regime because the Druze people in southern Syria are being attacked and also massacred by forces in Syria. So that is the current backdrop, this current news I'm about to tell you right now. And I want y'all all to take this news with a grain of salt because there are sources in the Middle East reporting this, but we need some more corroboration before we say with 100% certainty that this is a concrete fact. But we're hearing rumors right now that Jelani, who's the leader of the Syrian regime, might have left the Syrian capital of Damascus with his family, according to a source in the Middle East, which I will refrain from naming right this second because I need to do some more research on it. But this is the second or third source I've seen reporting that Jelani might have fled Damascus. So we're waiting to see if that is true. If that is true, that could indicate a coup attempt is what that could indicate. Or it could indicate that Jelani sees the writing on the wall that Israel is going to be trying to assassinate him. It could be that as well, because we have heard Israeli ministers say that they want to get rid of Jelani and his thugs. So right now, that's what we're hearing. And I really can't tell you for certain exactly which way this is going to head right now because we need more corroboration. But Enforcer, what say you?
It's an interesting situation. We'll actually be getting to the Syrian news here in a little bit on our show, but there's been some rapidly devolving situations in Syria at the moment, and we are not able to confirm whether he's left or not, but the stories revolving around al-Jilani right now are very similar to those of al-Assad, who fled Syria, and we were not really able to confirm that until a couple of days after he had actually left. So it seems as though at the moment al-Jilani may have possibly fled the Syrian Interim government, but we are still waiting to see whether that is true or not, and that is going to take some time to be able to corroborate. But it does appear that this is a major developing story that we were hearing about on air right now, and we were also hearing about this in the 30 minutes leading up to the stream. So we're keeping an eye on this, and we're trying to follow this as best we can, but it does appear that there's more and more statements that appear to be lining up with the idea that al-Jilani has actually fled Syria, possibly. Once again,
and also to make the rumors even worse, here's some more details coming out sort of on the rumor information that we're hearing is he most likely left Damascus by plane. So if you left by plane, he could have gone anywhere. He could have left the entire country potentially. But so far, honestly, this is a pretty compelling sounding rumor, but I don't want to say with certainty it's a fact until we can say it for a fact, but it seems compelling that he might have actually flown I don't want to say out of the country necessarily, but at least to maybe a safe house or some safe spot where he could be basically safe from assassination and leaving the capital. Because Israel's been striking in Damascus. They struck, obviously, the Ministry of Defense building, and they struck several others. And Jelani could have been next on the list, and he heard about it and decided to get on out of there before it actually came around to his turn.
It does appear that that might actually be the case in the moment, but we are going to be waiting to see if that is truly what we're hearing out of Syria at the moment. But outside of that, and getting back into our analysis on the Kaliningrad situation or the war in Ukraine situation, getting back to that, once again, it is outspending and outproducing your enemies that win. In World War II, once again, outspending and outproducing was what won the Second World War. The Nazis, the fascist Italians, and the Imperial Japanese could not outspend or outproduce industrially the combined power of the Allies. They just could not. It was impossible. That's why they lost. Like you could say that qualitatively, Germany's army in World War II was better trained or better equipped. Honestly, that's not even true. Like, if you actually look at the metrics, but let's just go with that goofy idea that some people have in the modern day, that the German army was actually better than the US Army or the British Army and so on. But the thing is that didn't matter, because if they had one Tiger tank, this is actually a famous saying from World War II, if the Germans had one Tiger tank, America had 20 Shermans. You lose. One Tiger tank cannot take on 20 Shermans at a time. We outnumber them every single day of the week, because while they can produce one Tiger, we'll produce 20 in that period of time. No way to match that. There's just no way in hell. The Germans sit there, they build one plane, we have about 5 heavy bombers and about 10 fighters to boot. There's no way you can beat that. The number, you just went out against them in the quality game, the quantity game, and the spending game. You just win in every way possible. And that's also what we've seen in every conventional war since then. Anyone who has the money and generally the industrial ability is able to beat another country. That's generally the rule. Very few exceptions to that. There are a few, but that's the general running rule, and that's something that the Russians are soon to learn. They're not able to outspend or outproduce the West, or really Ukraine for that matter, because they're being supported by the West. The end is nigh, coming around for them. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I could say on that situation. But with that, it is time for us to move on into that Middle East news, because we are hearing of some rapidly devolving situations inside of Syria once again, and we've also gotten a little bit of news out of Iran. But before we get into all of that, I do want to make sure that we address a couple of questions from the chat, at least a few, before we move on into the rest of the news for the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one goes to Rick Galenchin, our viewer from Canada, who throws in a very generous 50 Canadian donation. And thank you very much, Rick, as always, for supporting the channel and helping to keep it running. And he said, great work, gentlemen, and please take one from the chat.
I got to thank you for the kind words, Rick. Thank you for enjoying our work. We try our best. I hope the analysis has been incredibly good tonight, and I hope that you've enjoyed it a great deal, because we love talking about the stuff each and every single day, and we're always honored to know that so many people show up here to listen to the news. We've actually had about 16,000 live viewers at the peak tonight, which is absolutely crazy, because if y'all don't know, this is something that's actually a little bit nuts about this. We are consistently a top 30 live stream in America these days because of the viewership. Like, we're in the top 30 live streams that run in America daily on average. And I got to thank you all so much for watching. I wish we could say thanks to each and every one of y'all individually, the tens of thousands of y'all who are here right now. But sadly, we can't. I do want y'all to know, however, that we are entirely grateful and appreciative that y'all spend hours of your time here every single night listening to the news that's put out on this channel to get your scoop of what's going on out there in the world today. I can't tell y'all enough how much we are appreciative of that, and I can't thank you enough, Rick, for being one of those named people out there in the massive group of people watching right now who enjoyed the channel enough to go out of their way to support it and help this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this channel possible, to make it into the top 30 on a near daily basis. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat goes to Myron, who said, Matt and also Enforcer, how long do you expect Putin to survive, and how long do you expect Xi to survive inside of China? And for my side of it, I would say Putin will survive as long as the Russian people let him survive, basically. The West is not going to be able to take him out because he's well too fortified. He has way too much security around him, and he is very paranoid. So he's not going to be taken out by the West. I think that's pretty clear at this point. And for even a Russian citizen to go and basically depose Putin, that's going to be difficult. difficult because the FSB has a iron grip on the people. So nobody really has a chance to rise up and gain enough support to actually get rid of them. And because the FSB finds them, gets rid of them, or either puts them in prison. So he'll survive probably, honestly, unfortunately, for a very long time in his current position with the government. And unless something gets so bad in Russia, like, for example, the people can't buy food or do something like that, like the basics, the people are unlikely to rise up until that happens. So it basically all hinges on the economy going to crap or not. When the economy in Russia really goes to crap and they can't afford anything, that's when Putin will likely be deposed. But that might be a little ways off even right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that I think that Putin might be deposed a little bit sooner than we would actually believe. He might actually get deposed here within the next year or two with the financial situation we're seeing. And this always changes really from week to week and month to month as we get more or less information coming out of the region about what's actually happening. But at least in my opinion, his removal from power may be coming around the corner here incredibly soon. It's something to say when a country starts to print money like the Russians are having to do, and the economy's already in apocalyptic straits, that a leader usually doesn't survive through that sort of an economic downturn. The only kind of examples we could see of a leader surviving that kind of an economic downturn would be Mao during the Great Leap Forward, or Kim Il-sung, actually, during the March of Suffering, or Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il through the March of Suffering. Generally, it was Kim Jong-il, though, because he was the one who created the Songun as a response to the March of Suffering to make sure that his power was consolidated. But those are in pretty much watertight, iron fist dictatorships. And while Putin is a dictator, and a reprehensible one at that, he's not in an iron, watertight, lockdown, iron fist sort of a dictatorship. There are actually people who could rise up against him and easily overthrow them. We already saw that in mid-2023 with Yevgeny Prigozhin. And with that in mind, I'd have to say that we may actually be seeing that the financial situation gets so bad in Russia that pretty much anyone would be vying, any sort of an opportunistic person in the Russian government, whether they be a small member or a higher-up member close to Putin's inner circle, would be trying to overthrow Putin or oust him. So while right now I would say that he's not going to be thrown out immediately, within the next 2 years, there's a decent likelihood that if this economic situation doesn't turn around and it continues to get perilously worse, he could actually see that he could be thrown out of power, no matter how popular he is perceived to be, or at least how much he is able to suppress the public's dissent. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And really quickly, I saw a lot of people giving us congrats. I want to thank everyone for giving the congrats for us being in the top 30. It's really crazy to think that we're in the top 30 in America. I do thank everyone for the congrats on that because it's been a long time coming. I remember when I first started this channel, I was alone on this stream, and I had a peak viewership on the first stream I ran about the war in Ukraine on the very first opening hours of the conflict of, I think, 5 live viewers. Not incredibly large audience by any measure, but it was an audience nonetheless, and I was very appreciative for them. Since then, me and Matthew have built this channel into a veritable news empire, at least by a YouTube metric, and daily we're able to get into the top 40, and a good amount of the times nowadays, the top 30. I've got to thank everyone who's been with us over the years, who has pretty much been there since our first opening weeks of covering world news up until the present day, because it's been one hell of a journey. It's been a journey of 1,240 days of straight news coverage for the large part, and I've got to say that I'm entirely honored, along with Enforcer Matt, to be the one who gets to tell y'all the news every single day of what's going on around the world. Whether it be great news or bad news, we're the ones who get to tell y'all. And that is something that we consider to be a high honor, and we really have to thank everyone who's a part of our audience and spends time watching this channel, because it's a really crazy thing to think that we've been able to make it this far on something that I thought was a crapshoot dream or an idea when I first started doing it way back in August of 2021. So a huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for y'all's steadfast loyalty and devotion to getting your news from this channel, because it really does mean a lot to us, and I thank you all for your congratulations. If y'all don't believe me, I'll actually show y'all right here. This was us on Sunday of last week. This was the last time that the stats came out, and it wasn't this week. And you can actually see here, we were number 33 in America. And that's actually a little bit crazy to see, that we were 33 in the United States.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's just, it's a little bit wild, because we really don't realize that, folks, how large the channel's gotten, because it's actually been kind of gradual, because over the years it went from, 5 people watching, and then one night it was, I think, 3.8 thousand people watching, which blew me away when it happened. And then it slowly got up to 5, and then 7, and then about 10, and then it dropped back down to 7 for a very long time, and then it jumped back up to 10. And then recently we hit that 135,000 live viewer stream, and then since then it's been up in the near the high 10,000s or the 20,000s pretty consistently, and it's a really crazy thing to see. But still, I hope that was a little bit of a thanks to everyone who was giving us a congrats to that, and really it's a big congrats to all of y'all for appreciating our channel and having the endurance to be able to listen to us ramble for hours on end about news. So a big thanks to y'all for watching and spending all of your time here. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But a big thanks to Rick Galichin once again for the support and sponsoring that live chat.
Indeed, and also echo all those sentiments as well. And I also want to say a huge thank you to the audience as well for helping us to get to this point, because almost 500,000 subs and also being in the top like 35 every single night, that is insane. And honestly, like I think we've gotten so busy, it's hard to even keep up with the stats anymore. It's just like a full-on news cycle 24/7 now, collecting it, watching it, monitoring it. It's honestly a lot these days because the world's going nuts. So we got to stay on top of every single region of the world where conflicts are breaking out. But a huge thanks to everybody once again. And with that, we're now moving on to our next super chat, which goes to James Hughes, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, James, for that support. And also being a longtime channel legend, just like Rick. And James said, between NATO and the USA, $45 billion already given to Ukraine. There's up to $90 billion available for Ukraine military needs. And how much Ukrainian land will Russia get to keep almost, or pre-2022 invasion, or pre-2014 attack?
That is actually a great question, James Hughes, and it's one that we have to say is a little bit difficult to answer, actually, because the issue is that Russia is going to get something. Like, just to make that a little clear, if Russia does not financially collapse and lose everything, they are going to get something out of this war territorially. And what will it be? What are the limits? And there's a lot of strategic implications to that, not only on our side, but on their side as well, as to how Ukraine's borders end up being carved up at the end of this conflict. And I know a lot of people, and I'd have to agree, would like to see the Ukraine's territory is returned to them completely, but that is generally a total war or total victory perspective, and one that is generally unachievable in the modern nuclear age. So the Russians will end up getting some land, but what will it be? I would say that the most opportune sort of a situation that we could see is that the Russians are able to keep the DPR and LPR, which the borders are outlined in black here, as the part of territory they get to keep, and everything else, including Crimea, is returned to the state of Ukraine. The problem is, though, is that the Russians are legally going to claim that they cannot give Crimea over to Ukraine because technically, according to them, it's a Russian state and has been since 2014. It's not internationally recognized, but the Russians treat it and view it as an actual oblast of the Russian Federation. So for that reason, it would be really difficult to try and get back Crimea. However, for Western interests alone, they cannot have Crimea. Crimea is home to the Black Sea Fleet. It has major naval port infrastructure that can house and upkeep a significantly large navy. And whether the Russians would ever have enough money to build out a navy that would be large enough to take up the entirety of those port facilities, we cannot let them have Sevastopol. That's something I'm dead set on. Hell nor high water, the war will keep going in one way, shape, or form until the Ukrainians get Sevastopol back. That is a dead-on certainty. As far as the Donbass goes, or specifically Donetsk and Luhansk, while the situation would be unfortunate, that is the only area that I could see that we could generally say, and I think the Ukrainians could also say, is not strategically important enough that it could actually be given away to the Russians to kind of appease them a little bit, but not a lot. We're not looking to make them happy. We're just looking to end this thing at some point. And unless if we're willing to push this war on into 7 or 8 years from now, which a lot of people may not be willing to do that, even the Ukrainians may not be willing to do that, something will have to be given up. And if it is, I would say that it should be what was left of the LPR and the DPR before the war began in 2022. But I still would say that at this point, the Ukrainians should get everything back pre-22 invasion as well as Crimea. I think that is guaranteed, deadline non-negotiable. What the Russians get out of the former LPR and DPR is one thing. That is negotiable to some extent, but they need to get everything else back. There needs to be no land bridge. The Russians cannot keep anything left in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, and they cannot have Crimea. Guaranteed. Cannot have that at all. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I do thank you for the incredible support and help this channel to keep on running, James Hughes. And I also see some people saying that they disagree in the chat. But here's the issue, folks. This is a realistic issue, and I'm speaking about it not as someone who is entirely caught up in pro-Western and pro-American interests to the point that it's pretty much almost blindsided ideological fervor. It's more so from a more realistic and pragmatic mindset. The conflict does have to end eventually, and there is most likely some sort of red line that could start to force this thing into a tactical nuclear exchange. What is that? When does that come? Where is that red line? Because we have a red line just like the Russians do, where we would start to pull out nuclear weapons and use them. And in this modern kind of a nuclear age, while we would love to push forward the idea of a total victory, and I think that that would be amazing, at the same time, there are realistic limitations to what we can do before they start to lose their minds over there in Russia, and they go cuckoo. So for that reason, we have to be able to try and strike a balance of winning the war as much as we practically can, while at the same time not forcing the conflict to go into a total war mindset where nuclear weapons could be used in a tactical level against the Ukrainians or against NATO forces in Eastern Europe, because that is a realistic reality that we are facing with each passing day. Think about it like this. While the Cold War ended in 1991, the Cold War still survives today because those very nuclear weapons that threatened to kill us in the Cold War are still around today, and the Russians still have access to them. Whether they're working or not is one thing. Even if half of them are working, that could still wipe out pretty much most of Europe and the United States. Because, once again, the Russians have enough nuclear weapons, at least in their arsenal on paper, to destroy the world about 3 times over right now, and the US has about that same amount as well. So you have to keep that in mind. Even if half of them are working, they still have the ability to destroy the world 1.5 times over. So with that in mind, we have to make sure that while we want to win, we still have to give something to them a little bit to make them save face to a minimal degree, so that way it ends up not becoming a situation where we could see a major conventional war break out across the whole of Europe, and then it ends up a tactical nuclear exchange. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, or at least the reason why I explained that way, because while I would love to see all of Ukraine's territory returned to them, and not see any Ukrainians under Russian subjugation, we also live in a nuclear age, which makes the situation a lot more complex than we would originally like to think. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, but with that, we are going to be on to the next one. But a huge shout out to James Hughes once again, an old guard and channel legend, for a great super chat and a great question. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of our news.
All right, so jumping into the last one here. This one goes to Elvis, who puts in a very generous $100 donation. Massive, by the way. The largest one of the night. And thank you very much, Elvis, for that support. And he said, great job, fellas. And what side of the Syrian cluster F do you think that Turkey is going to come down on? It's such a complex dynamic. And does Turkey deserve the security they get from NATO membership? Or should NATO show them the door? And what are your thoughts?
And I thank you for the incredible support, the massive support, Elvis. I got to thank you incredibly. Thank you very much. But to answer your question, I would have to say, let's see, Syria is going to support the SIG, because the SIG is pretty much their creation. Turkey kind of like coddled the HTS, the Tahrir Tahrir al-Sham, which is what the Syrian Interim government is largely made up of at this point, that led to the collapse of the Assad regime eventually. Turkey was the one who did that. So these terrorists, and I have to say this, folks, while the Department of State may not call the SIG a terrorist force, I'm largely going to call them a terrorist force. Everything that they're doing is paramount similar to what ISIS was doing when they were in control of large swaths of Syria and Iraq. So I'm going to call them a terrorist organization, because I don't think at this point it was wise or a prudent measure to remove them from the list of terrorist organizations here in the country. But outside of that, these terrorist forces are largely supported by the Turks. So if the Turks are ever going to back anyone up or support them, it is going to be the SIG. They are going to support them entirely. They hate the SDF. They view the SDF as incredibly similar to that of the PKK, which was a former Kurdish group that conducted asymmetrical terroristic activities against the Turks in hopes of liberating the southeastern region of Anatolia into a semi-autonomous or completely independent Kurdish state. And so for that reason, they're certainly not going to back the SDF. They're not going to back the Druze neither, because the Druze are not really a part of the Sunni Arab majority group that they were supporting in the HTS. As far as the Turks are concerned, at least as far as a cultural group would be concerned in Syria, that would be most aligned to the Turks, it would be the Sunni Arab groups that currently are in control through the HTS, through al-Jilani, and the Syrian Interim government. So with that in mind, whatever they do, it's going to be in support of the Syrian Interim government. It's a difficult situation, especially because of that, because the U.S. openly supports the SDF. Although it's a complicated situation at this point, we don't clearly support the SDF. We're almost halfway supporting the terrorists as well in the SIG at this moment. So it's a little bit of a complicated situation in foreign policy. But as far as Turkey goes, I think that we shouldn't boot them out of NATO. Because while they're probably one of the worst allies that we have in NATO, there's a lot of value to be had out of their position in the world. They are still at the crossroads of a great deal of global trade. A lot of maritime trade passes through the Mediterranean and also around the surrounding area of Turkey. The Bosphorus and the Dardanelles is still a vital way to close off any Russian naval assets from ever reaching the greater Mediterranean if they're in NATO. So while they are generally the most sucky ally that we could ever imagine inside of NATO at the moment, thanks to Erdogan, you can really throw all the blame right at his lap. Turkey wasn't like this until he became the leader. I would still say that they should be in NATO just because of the strategic position that they have geographically in the world. There also technically is no way to kick them out because NATO doesn't actually have an exit clause where all member states can vote to kick someone out. They're the only country that can leave, and they can only leave on their own accord. So they would have to notify the United States that they want to leave NATO, but we actually can't force them out. So that's
a huge deal. Like, I think a lot of people believe you can just kick countries out of NATO or like tell them just to get lost. Basically, you can't do that at all. There's, like the enforcer said, there is no way to do that. And also, even if you could kick Turkey out, even though, like the enforcer said, they're kind of a crappy ally, you wouldn't really want to kick them out because at that point, Turkey would have a bone to pick with NATO at that point because they're pissed off they got kicked out. And also, Turkey clearly has ambitions to be a regional power broker, basically, and that would probably strengthen their ambitions to move away from the West, strengthen their ties with the other powers in the world, which are not pro-Western, and that would be probably not very good for the region, because then Turkey, being a pretty strong economic powerhouse, would then be at the behest of China and Russia and these other countries, even more so than they are now. So it's better to keep them under our thumb, basically, from an economic and political sense, and also make sure to sell Turkey weapons that basically rely on NATO, like resupply and shipment, to keep them basically under our influence to a large degree.
Also, another thing I'd have to say is that as far as battling what Turkey is doing, because we all know the old saying here on this channel. What is the old saying, folks? I want to see it in the live chat really quickly. What is the old saying we always say about Turkey on this channel? Turkey does Turkey things. And generally, Turkey actually has a premise and principle to the Turkey things that they do. But the thing is that we have to find a way to combat them. And the way that we combat them is this way. It's quite simple, really. Turkey wants to have greater influence in the Middle East. The U.S. just tells them to get lost. Fly a kite. The Turks are not going to pick a fight with the United States. That's the simple answer. That's the bottom line. So if we sit there and face down the Turks inside of Syria and say, you will not touch the SDF, or you're going to get the wrath of the United States, the Turks will go, oh, well, I mean, we might not like Kurds, but, our hands are kind of tied, and they disappear, like they kind of do with the Israelis every time the Israelis meet them at the head. The other thing that we can do is that I think if I was the President of the United States, if you all voted for me as President of the United States, I would personally request to meet with some of the head leaders of France, Germany, Poland, Italy, some of the larger economic power players in the European Union. And I would meet with them in a small summit. Generally, maybe just call together the G7, because that's pretty much most of them. Call together the G7, go to the G7 summit and say, Turkey is currently investing heavily in the Balkans. It's building them soft power in that region, and it's starting to give the Turks a decent amount of sway and control over a lot of NATO and EU members within this region. We can't have that. America's dealing with Turkey's attempts at creating a mini-sphere in the Middle East right now, but we would like for Europe to join us in a united front to really curb Turkey's mini-sphere of influence ambitions that they're working on right now. So if y'all could come together with a common fund, the European Union common fund, to also heavily invest in these Balkan states inside the Balkans, and to pretty much counter any Turkish financial investments that are being made in these countries, which are leading to the Turks to gain soft power in this region, we can pretty much stop the Turks from realizing their miniature sphere of influence ambitions, or their sphere within a sphere ambitions, pretty much off the bat. They won't gain any ground in the Middle East because of U.S. intervention, and they won't gain any economic ground around the Danube economic basin because the European Union will have created a common fund to invest in businesses and, I guess you could say, economic enterprise within this area that would be able to rival those of the Turks and generate a great enough deal of soft power through the European Union's direct financial investment in the Balkans to generally completely neutralize anything that Turkey's doing. So generally that's the best way to deal with the Turks at this point, is to just either meet them head on in the Middle East and go, you're not doing this and you're not touching this. And then in the Balkans, just financially beat them out in pretty much a financial spending game. That would be,
and also you can just get control. Just offer to give Erdogan some money or something, and he'll be on our side, because that fellow there, he's very like straightforward. I think not too hard to get some influence with Erdogan, I don't think, or at least in my opinion. So it's not too hard to sort of sway Erdogan one way or another. That's kind of why, in my opinion, he sways back and forth between the pro-Western and then also pro-Russian stance. He sways back and forth between the two because he knows he wants to put himself right in the middle. So he has people vying for him and also trying to basically win his influence. And obviously, that's an easy way to gain favor with people, is because all of a sudden now everybody wants to be your friend. They want to give you gifts and things like that. And that's a perfect place that Turkey wants to find themselves in, which is currently where they're at right now.
Yeah, I would say that's probably also a good way to try and deal with Erdogan. But I also say that we should deal with their actual sphere building ambitions at their head, where they're forming in the Middle East and in the Balkans. Because if you hit them there, you've pretty much knocked them out of the game. You've neutralized their efforts in the Balkans and in the Middle East. There is no more sphere building. They're stuck inside Turkey. Or to play on a good old-fashioned joke from the area of the southern Mediterranean, we could just remind the Greeks that the Turks exist as a group. That ought to get things pretty spicy. If y'all don't know, the Turks hate the Greeks and the Greeks hate the Turks. They hate each other. Like the amount of hatred between those two countries, although they're both in NATO, is unbelievable. It's surreal. It's so bad that both countries agreed, because they hate each other so much, that the Turks would get and expel, I think it was 1.5 million Greeks from Turkey, and the Greeks in turn would take 1 million Turks and forcibly expel them from Greece back into Turkey. And that happened in the 60s. Like, they hated each other that much, they said, we don't want a single Turk in Greece. And then the Turks said, we don't want a single Greek in Turkey. And they both agreed, we hate each other so much, let's just grab up everyone who's from the other country and throw them at the other and get rid of them.
Yeah, but now Greece is broke now, so I bet they've changed their tune a little bit.
Actually, no, they still hate the Turks. Like, believe it or not, they generally still dislike the Turks. Like, they don't hate them. Like, it's kind of like smooth. It's kind of like how South Korea and Japan work. Like, they dislike each other, but they don't hate each other extremely. The Greeks and the Turks still dislike each other a good deal. It's got a lot of historical stuff going on with it. But, you know, we could do that, and the Greeks could end up pretty much stopping most Turkish sphere-building ambitions, because the Greeks hate the Turks and the Turks hate the Greeks. It's a classic thing of the southern Mediterranean. But anyways,
I think the Turks came out on top, though, because Greece went broke. Turkey didn't go broke. Turkey, I think, positioned themselves way better than Greece ever did. It's not saying anything about the credibility of the government necessarily. It's just they're a little bit smarter on an economic front, at least.
Yeah, that's true. But it was an intro. Like, honestly, man, I would highly suggest, man, that you look into the history of that one, because it's it's actually hilarious to look at it from a third person perspective, because it literally is the fact. The Greeks don't like the Turks because they're just Turks, and the Turks don't like the Greeks because they're just Greeks. Like, that's basically all it boils down to. It's like not even ideological or anything. It's literally just simple stuff like, they don't eat what we eat, they don't dress how we dress, they're bastards. Like, that's literally like what the basic thing comes down between them. It is a little bit more complicated than that when you get really into the weeds, but that's the basic rundown of the two groups, is that they just dislike each other because they're different. It's like, I don't even get it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to Elvis for that massive support and help with this channel to keep on running. And speaking of your super chat, Elvis, that actually moves us on into the second segment of this news, and that moves us actually right on into the Middle East, which is what we were talking about due to your super chat. And speaking of Syria, we have been able to hear of some massive developments that are happening in this region. We were able to hear that the Druze people and the general Sunni Arab population are pretty much at blows anywhere that they are. We actually got to see at Aleppo University, which is similar to I don't know, like any other university, I guess. They were
Harvard.
throwing. Say what?
It's like Harvard.
Yeah, it's like Harvard, but like, cheap. But outside of that, we saw that the Druze and the Sunni Arabs were throwing hands at Aleppo University today.
Oh no, they got those educated hands. They're training those Harvard hands. Oh damn, they're busting the glasses out.
It's a pretty tumultuous sort of a time.
Hands rated PG for everybody.
Man, no, they're rated E for everybody.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they're rated PG. Man, these are like very, very friendly hands here. PG. What's that one dude running back and forth for? You see that one guy at the edge of the like balcony right there? He's just running back and forth like he's sprinting, like in the like pacer test or something, like in school they used to give people. He's just running back and forth just for the hell of it.
He's just trying to get his steps in, man. Why are you judging? Like there might be a culture war happening around him. He's just trying to get his steps in, dude. Like he's got his priorities straight. But cutting this clip short because that's pretty much the entire clip for 2.5 minutes. And moving on down into the area of southern Syria, we were able to hear of a new contender within the region. The Tribal Army of Syria. I'm not going to lie, they're not making themselves sound any more advanced than what they're looking like in the video. Calling yourself the Tribal Forces of Syria doesn't really paint a picture of an advanced armed force. It more so paints a group of a bunch of random people who are going down to conduct crimes against humanity. But here's a clip of them making their way to Suwayda at night.
Ah, yes. The good old-fashioned... Oh, wow, some machine gun. I would hate to live in Syria.
And some of y'all may be wondering, well, why are they on their way to Suwayda? Well, according to them, it's literally just to kill Druze. That's the whole point of this tribal army. That's what they stated they're doing. That's what al-Jilani stated they're doing. It's a group of people that al-Jilani claims is out of his control that have just amassed throughout all of Syria, 70,000 strong, and they're all on their way down to Suwayda to pretty much wipe out the Druze. That's what they've stated they're going to do. So here's another clip of them. This is just a repeat of the last clip. But we also were able to get some additional footage of them making their way to Suwayda.
On bicycles, trucks, whatever they can use to get down there, they're going.
These are just normal Syrian pastimes at this point. Like, the idea of just waging endless war seems to be a very Syrian concept at this point. Because the Syrian civil war ended and everyone thought, oh, they must be tired of, like 12 years of endless war. Hell no. Like, get the war going again. Get those fires revving. And on top of that, we also got to see that they did start to make it towards the city of Suwayda. And there was a lot going on down here as well. They made it to the gates. And we'll show y'all in a second what started to happen.
فها هي عشائر سوريا إذا غضبت كالبراكين نعم أم كنتم أيها دروز الخونة عملاء الصهاينة إن كنتم تظنون أن البلاد بلا حماة تعالوا وانظروا جيشا يباد
This guy's speech almost sounds like Far 4 without trying to do like the Mickey Mouse voice.
I'm just imagining what he could be possibly saying. Here's what he should be saying. He should be saying, we're about to cross over into the gates of southern Syria, and when we cross this right here, we're basically signing our death warrant because Israel is going to launch a full-scale war against us and wipe us out permanently. It's like, it is so stupid. Like, and here's the stupid part. They will cross over, go down there and start attacking the Israeli-backed Druze. They'll do that knowing that Israel's going to come after them, knowing that Israel is heavily armed, way more than they'll ever be, and they're not ragtag forces. Israel is a well-organized powerhouse, and these guys will still run down there and do it. It's just insanity.
I don't even know what the hell the point is. It's like if y'all don't know, these people have come from all over Syria, like from Aleppo, from literally everywhere. And they all banded together to drive down to southern Syria, a place they don't live, to kill the Druze. Like, that's literally the whole point they did this. It's like, why? It's like, y'all don't even live in southern Syria. It's like even still conducting these crimes against humanity, there's no excuse for them. But it's not even like they live near the Druze. They're just doing this to kill them. It's like, I just don't even get it at this point anymore. Honestly, I gotta tell y'all, my opinions of the general Syrian populace is starting to not really improve, because they had a chance to end all of the conflicts and the fights after the Syrian civil war ended. And their result pretty much bringing the country into anarchy, where they could pretty much choose as individuals what they wanted to do. Everyone just chose, let's all keep killing each other as their choice. Like, you would generally think people would be exhausted of 12 years of fighting.
It's not the Syrian people. Like, I want to make that perfectly clear. The Syrian, like the normal Syrian people, from what I can tell, they don't want this crap. Like, they really don't. But when you don't have a strong, unified government, and the new government is Jelani, and he's not unified. He wants to make the appearance he's unified, but he's not. He still has all these different factions that were already fighting for power. They're still fighting for power, even with him in charge. And you have the Kurd situation, the Druze situation, and nobody's unified. So all these groups, like these guys right here on this video, they weren't happy with Jelani taking charge in the first place anyway. They weren't really happy with that. They wanted their own little sphere of power, their own faction to stay in like some form of power in its own right. So they're going to still go for it. These are just the extreme radical lunatics that basically don't have jobs, and the best thing they have to do is go start massacring people, which is just terrible. But it's not their normal civilians. Like, I don't think so.
But the thing is, though, is that from what we know, and I've tried to do as much research as possible on this today, whether or not Jelani told these people to go down there or not, and generally he's saying that he didn't, and I wouldn't believe that too much. These people are just random people. Like, this isn't an army or anything like that that's been armed or proved to exist by any sort of a force in the region, like the SDF or the SIG or anything. These are literally just random people in Syria who all gathered together, kind of like almost like a protest would exist in the United States, where everyone just shows up for a protest. These people all just showed up with guns to go down there and kill Druze. I mean, these are literally just normal people out of Syria who are going down there to do this at this point. Like, it's not a part of the SIG, it's not a part of anything that. These people literally just rose up today and went on their way down to Suwayda to go kill Druze. Like, that's what
I think they're militiamen. Personally, I think they're militiamen. They may be like, and also like tribal forces. Like that, they were a force to begin with. They're calling themselves tribal forces, but they probably have like loose like rank and structure. They're probably not just random people that like grab guns and vests and stuff like that. They had something going on already, some form of force basically. So I don't think these are normal civilians personally. And also, I am not buying for a single second that these guys are down here on their own accord. Like, that Jelani is in charge right now, and he has the power to stop these guys with his own forces. And where are Jelani's forces stopping these guys? You don't see them anywhere, do you? You don't see them on the streets. You don't see them stopping them. It's not happening. But yet all these guys, and they're in pretty large numbers, tens of thousands of these tribal forces heading down to the Israeli Druze people to attack them. You know, Jelani's not stopping it. So I think it's pretty obvious, even by just implication, that Jelani's responsible for this, and he's trying to create some level of plausible deniability so that way Israel doesn't just assassinate him right off the bat.
Possibly so. That's also a likelihood. But regardless, the situation in Syria is going to have to be fixed. We'll get into that in a second, but in the meantime, we're going to make sure to get through the rest of what we've been hearing out of Syria at the moment.
وجابهنا روسيا وجميع الأحزاب الانفصالية وغيرها وقد دسنا على أشلائهم دمرنا طائراتهم حرقنا جنودهم فلا تمتحنون صبر قبائل سوريا نعم قبائل السنة فإنا قادمون وسنحرر كل بقعة على أرض سوريا بإذن الله عز وجل تكبير الله أكبر تكبير.
After this, the tribal armies started to attack the the Druze people inside of Suwayda, and we were able to get a lot of the clips of the firefights that were happening around the city. And of course, they were some of the heaviest sounding firefights that could be heard.
Oh, damn. Now, let me ask you something, man. If these are just normal Syrian civilians that just happen to grab arms and head down there, how the hell are they this well, like, equipped with ammunition? Because, I mean, we're Second Amendment American gun owners, and we have ammunition and weapons and things like that. But we don't have any type of ammunition like that. Like, those guys right there just can't be normal civilians.
The simple answer is when the HTS was pushing through, they didn't occupy anywhere. They just kept driving, and the Syrian Arab Army ceased to exist wherever the HTS went through. Meaning that every single army armory in the country was wide open to anyone who wanted to go in. Just the same way that post 2003 invasion of Iraq by the coalition forces, a lot of Iraqi army stockpiles and armories were left wide open to the public, and that's how a lot of groups like the Fedayeen started to arm and equip themselves, and later started to become the Arab Alliance and then al-Nusra and so on, that were able to target and attack U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq from 2004 all the way up till about 2011 and 2012 when we left for the remainder of the time. It's pretty much the same sort of a situation, and that's why these people are so well armed.
Interesting. I would say personally that it seems to me like, here's another thing as well. If Jelani wanted to lock down these former armories or wherever this ammo is being stored, he could have done that as well, but he didn't. And he's leaving it wide open for these guys that are quote unquote normal civilians that have nothing to do with his regime. He's letting them basically go down there and take the ammo if that's where they're getting it from, which I personally have some doubts. And he's letting them run down there and go do this without any opposition. So, I think it speaks for itself personally.
I think it's largely speaking for itself at this point, but we also got another clip of the fighting inside of Suwayda. Actually, this is the same one as a duplicate. But moving on from that, we also got another clip of fighting around the area of Suwayda. This is a part of the 50 to 70,000 strong tribal army, which is currently besieging the city at the moment. Oh, they actually dub music over there. We're going to have to mute that. But we can see them here whipping out another RPG and firing. This guy almost got killed. He almost ran right in front of it. We see them now firing a PKP around the corner.
I bet that's very accurate.
Oh yeah, you know it. Like hip firing it, it's got to be the most accurate possible. It's not about being effective. It's about being cool. We all know that's the rule of fighting. But that's the end of that clip, but still showing some of the fighting that's going on around Suwayda at the moment. Meanwhile, the Israelis are starting to bring in a large amount of Hermes drones over the skies of Syria, which unfortunately this clip will not play. But we also got to see some IDF forces making limited incursions into Syrian territory earlier today around the Druze lands. Whole lot of Humvees. Oh, hey, look, there was a guy with the Druze flag right there. Right there, you can see it, the red, yellow, blue, and white.
Oh, yeah, sure is.
So around here is some kind of a Druze militia or a Druze checkpoint that the IDF is passing through. Generally, folks, if y'all don't know, the Druze and the IDF consider themselves to be allies, even for the Druze forces that are not in the Golan Heights. So the IDF generally has a understood alliance with the Druze, meaning that they pass through Druze territory with safe passage. And we see more of the Druze flags up here. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing at least some limited involvement by the Israelis. But this is leading a lot of people to wonder whether Israel is going to get completely involved in this situation or not here soon. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that there's large numbers of Syrian tribal forces moving toward the Israeli Druze to attack them, we just literally saw them at the gates just a moment ago. What are your thoughts about where this is going to go? So 62% said Israel will launch a full war soon on the Syrian regime, while 16% said the Syrian regime will probably collapse first, and 11% said the Syrian regime will probably halt their operation very soon. So me personally, if this keeps going the way this is going, and, Jelani is the one who's de facto in charge of the country right now, because he's the one who's technically the figurehead of it, then Israel's probably going to go full in on Jelani. It's pretty much imminent at this point, unless the Syrians somehow get these tribal forces away from the southern part of Syria and away from the Druze people. Then Israel will have basically no choice but to launch a full war, because otherwise they're going to let the Druze people get massacred by these extremists that are going down there to go kill them, basically. So Israel really doesn't have an option here. They're going to have to do something, and obviously a full war is coming. They've already attacked in Damascus and they've attacked elsewhere. So it wouldn't be far-fetched at all to see, but potentially the entire regime get taken out by Israel in the future unless this is stopped. So I'm with the 62%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I'm with the 62% as well. The Israelis will have to launch a full-scale war and occupational attempt into southern Syria to try and protect the Druze. And I would actually say that, once again, I think that the Department of State should start to push for the Balkanization of Syria and the division of the country into separate cultural groups, borders, and regions, to be able to try and protect the individual cultural groups from each other, considering that outside of that, people are going to endlessly be getting massacred inside of Syria without end. So we should see that the Alawite Arabs of the coast end up getting their own semi-autonomous region. The Sunni Arabs are allowed largely control of some form of a technical Syrian Arab Republic of a kind. Homs should be declared a free city. The Druze land should become a completely independent country or semi-autonomous region, and then the Kurdish lands of the north should become a completely separate country. I think at this point, that is literally the only way that we can stop this endless amount of violence and bloodshed that we keep seeing popping up continuously throughout the entirety of Syria, and then keep some sort of peacekeeping forces in the region to maintain the peace, or fund these groups to be able to build up their own peacekeeping and armed forces to protect themselves from each other. Hopefully that would eventually stop the violence we're seeing right now. But with that, I hope that does address it the best it can, and that's currently what we're seeing evolving out of Syria at the moment. And moving on from that, we were able to hear of another unidentified explosion inside of Tehran. They said that they were smoking. Get it? Because it's a fire. That's the end of that clip. But moving on from that and on over into East Asia, we were able to hear of Chinese low-level coercion efforts near to the island of Taiwan today. 58 Chinese aircraft and 9 Chinese naval vessels were spotted around the island. Outside of that, the Russians have also stated that they are scared of the Japanese. Russia has formally protested Japan's participation in U.S. military exercises near Russian borders, calling it a potential threat to national security. Moscow says Japan's involvement shows signs of preparing for armed conflict and warns that it will trigger appropriate countermeasures. Womp womp. Outside of that, and moving on back into Europe, we also were able to hear of significant developments outside the United States of America and Europe. We were able to hear the United States has now issued a do-not-travel order to Syria to U.S. citizens. We've also been able to hear that the United States does not support Israel's recent strikes on Syria. A little bit odd, but that is what it is. And we've also been able to hear that a new optic is being developed for the Marines, which will allow for them to get pretty much ballistic targeting data to their optics to be able to shoot down drones more effectively. Does it really work? I don't know. Would it be effective? I don't really know. Many questions about that sort of a system, but we're running out of time, so we won't really have enough time to rabbit hole on that. We've also been able to hear that purchase orders for 5 Swiss Patriot batteries have been delayed for faster shipments to the state of Ukraine. And moving on into the actual Ukraine war news, or the greater Russia news, we were able to hear that a Russian general, Major General Vladimir Shesterov, has been sentenced to 6 years of the Gulag for embezzling more than 25 million rubles during construction work at Patriot Park military exhibition. Before his detention, Shesterov was serving as the deputy head of the main directorate for innovative development of the Russian Defense Ministry, and he was also shoving more cheese danishes down his throat than you could ever have imagined. This man was truly so fat that he is actually rivaling Kim Jong-un in fatness. Some people actually said that when they told him in the military academy that armies of old used to live off the fat of the land, he actually took that literally and became the fat of the land. This man, as a matter of fact, has so much blubber in him that he put the whaling industry out of business simply by going to the toilet. This is Vladimir Shesterov. He is probably the fattest man in the Russian military, and I have a feeling, Matthew, that you're itching for a couple of strikes against Shesterov yourself.
Yeah, this guy right here, they said the post says he was apparently allegedly sentenced for embezzling more than 25 million rubles during construction work at Patriot Pork military exhibition. So he apparently took it all. He took it all. He took all the hors d'oeuvres, all the catering. He took all the money, apparently. This guy took it all. Honestly, if you want to identify a Russian general, if you don't know their rank or their uniform like layout or something, whichever one is the plumpest, that's usually the general.
You know, man, it's like they're like, wow, he embezzled 25 million rubles. Where did it all go? It clearly went into food with how he looks. Like we know where the money went. Like it was money well spent, for at least for him. And I guess you'll be living off the fat of the land in the gulag, I suppose. But anyways, moving on from that fat bastard and into the rest of the Russian news, we have been able to see that a chemical plant was destroyed south of Tula today. It was loud.
You said a chemical plant?
Yes.
That could be bad.
Yeah, it could be.
Вот прям огонь. Я не понимаю, что это горит.
She doesn't understand what's burning, but we do. We also have another clip as well, or a little bit more information about the hit inside of Tula. This was actually on the chemical plant in Prvomysky, south of Tula in the Tula Oblast. So, great to hear. Moving on from that and on into the area around Yelets, we also got to see a Russian Ka-52 in a very rare moment firing an Igla at a Ukrainian drone and shooting it down.
Блядь, не снимается еще нихуя. Вот хуярь.
We got the Russian Muppets commentating this clip, by the way. I don't know if y'all heard them, but they both sound like Muppets.
I can envision what they look like without even seeing them.
Yeah, me too.
Ебать, он сваливает, нахуй. Сука, ебаный.
Wow, dude, that guy did a great job of capturing the action. Any farther right, we would have seen nothing.
Хорош, красавчик.
They blew it up.
yeah. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the Ukraine war news, we were also able to hear that a SAM site hit a Russian Shahed over northern Ukraine earlier today in this clip. Take a look. Any second now. And kaboom. It's gone.
Ooh.
It's like magic, nearly. And there's the one frame where it hit.
That was a weird, like, effect on that, too. Like, the way it hit it head on like that, just, like, blew the explosives, like, sprayed them back. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, like, it literally blew it clean out the back, like Taco Bell. But outside of that, we also were able to see the Russian casualty report. And Miss Disa said 250 drones is the 9th highest daily loss. And that is great to hear. And a big shout out to Miss Disa, keeper of the records.
Miss Keeper.
Miss Keepa of the records, for getting that info for us. But outside of that, today's casualty reports were pretty good. 1,190 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 1 APC, 154 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 43 artillery pieces, 250 drones, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Outside of that, we also were able to hear within northern Ukraine that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a Russian river crossing in this area. You can see the small river crossing right there. They're about to clear it out. The drone's shimming around, getting lined up just right. And here we go. And, well, let's see what we got here. There's the drone. Gently making... Oh, and there it goes. It looks like that first hit may have done something. It got the water flowing. But here's the next drone that came in. We can see it's sitting in the drink right there. It blew up right next to the logs. It looks like the logs are now gone. And the crossing is gone as well. Yippee! We now see them going after some more Russian targets in the area. And I gotta say, the Bobcat skid steer jokes died a long time ago now, Matthew. There's no more of them to even make the joke on.
Man, honestly, I just got demoralized. Like, at one point, I was just like, man, it's like we're getting a few big losses here occasionally with the Bobcats. But honestly, I think it's a testament how well Ukraine's taken them out. Like, they've taken out the special equipment to where Russia is either hiding it behind the lines or something, because they're not really hitting very much of it.
There are none left anymore, simply.
All their special equipment went by the wayside, like their special soldiers. What the hell are we looking at?
I don't even know. I was very confused. That's why I wasn't even saying anything. I was like, I don't actually know what we were looking at.
Monster Lab said, it's going to be okay, Matt. I guess it will be. It's just a tough thing. The Bobcat thing was my whole identity for a long time, so I'll have to regroup.
Matthew was much like many modern people in our generation. There was one thing that he was interested in, and he clung to it, and that's all there was about him. It was Bobcat skid steers. Much like for me, the only thing that matters in my life is trains. And y'all want to hear about them? No, I'm just kidding. But we can see the supply truck was hit and knocked out. Moving on from that, and
the funny part is, even though the Ukrainians are in a war, they're still running trains on the Russians. Like, it's crazy. Don't call them a conductor, but they're running trains.
Man, that's deep. But we also got to see this one Ukrainian soldier holding down a whole front. Take a look at this. Well, at least one area. But he hopped out of the M113. He's getting on out there. We see him running up to a burning dugout. And we can see that there's a wounded man on the ground that they're going to be evacuating. This one man right here actually held this entire trench for a couple of hours on his own against a Russian assault. He was wounded, and now they're evacuating him. I don't really know how he ended up in the situation, to be entirely honest with y'all, but it was still a impressive story of heroism nonetheless. But moving on from that and down the line, we also were able to hear that, according to CNN, most observant CNN, there are 160,000 troops somewhere. Actually, really quickly, let me make sure that I get you all the exact wordage from the CNN article. Russia is thought to be days or weeks away from surging into a heightened summer offensive. Perhaps using 160,000 troops, Ukrainian officials have said, are amassing near their front lines. But in the past 2 weeks, Russia has made small but vital advances, placing its forces in a better position to cut off Ukrainian troops in 3 key towns, Pokrovsk, Konstantinivka, and Kupiansk on the Eastern Front. Where in the world, I'm just going to leave that for what it is. I don't really know how accurate this article is. And also, the Russians amassing 160,000 troops anywhere in any focalized area is highly unlikely, to be entirely honest with you all. But moving on from that, we also got to see a failed assault at Belarus earlier today. Oh, dang, the dubstep hit hard right there. That actually jiggled my neurons. And oh, look, they grouped up very politely. Everyone always knows the first thing you do in war is group up and get it as close together as possible.
Two group. 3 group in this case.
Oh, 4 group, actually. All of them got destroyed. And they're coming in and just clearing them on out now.
That's some pretty bad losses, actually. They're just losing like 4 pieces of equipment in one little tiny little spot. It's pretty rough.
Also, I saw some people saying it's CNN. Yeah, I'd agree, because it's like, I always love how like groups like CNN just go, trust me, bro, on everything. They never name a source. Like, even if they have a source, they literally remove the name. So that way you never notice when there is really a good source and not. Like, they'll just be like, people are saying, and there's no one who's saying anything like that. It's just that they want to say that, so then they just said people are saying, and they don't even provide who said it. It's like there are a lot of people in the Ukrainian government who easily could have been cited to say that, that would have been authorized to say that, like Kirilo Budanov, or Rustem Umarov, or Zelensky, or Stefan Olenchuk, aka Brutus. There's like a million people who you could have cited that would have said that information. Instead, they just say, people are saying, someone out there said, folks are saying, someone said this. Like if NATO, if CNN told y'all what the NATO LANCOM commander said earlier today, General Donahue, they would have just said, some people said we beat Russia to death. Like, and it's like, who said that? Like, where? Like, who is this guy, and is he even important? And then it turns out that sometimes it's like a janitor from the Pentagon, and then other times it is the NATO Landcom Commander, General Donahue. And it's like, why can't they just make it clear who said what? You know, like, I don't know. That's why I had to say that one would take it with a grain of salt, because some people are saying, and it's like, who's saying it, and what proof do they have? Because we can't work with that. Like, you know, I always find it, folks, funny, people who who diss us here on this channel for doing this because we're not certified journalists or whatever the hell that is, because I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. But also the thing is like the quote unquote certified journalists like CNN and Fox and stuff, they come up with the most bullshit dog water stories, and they run with them, and it's like they do no research on them at all. Who, where, what, when, why? None of that's answered. It's just a general, like, it's a vague sort of a thing. It's like going to a palm reader, and they're like, something's going to happen. It's like, yeah, I know that, but what, and when, and where, and what, when, why? Like none of those are answered. But anyways, moving on from that and down into Pokrovsk, because we don't have enough time to rabbit hole. We're already 2 hours deep into a news segment. We also got to see the Ukrainians taking some prisoners around the Pokrovsk area. Oh, they have music. I don't know why every single video has to have music in the war in Ukraine, but we'll just leave it alone. But anyways, they're climbing out of the trench now.
Also, someone said there's no such thing as a certified journalist. You're right. There is no such thing. It's not like you get licensed as a journalist or something. The mainstream outlets, when they give somebody like a journalist pass or identification, it's literally just something that's created on, Microsoft Word that they've just laminated and given to them. So it's not like they have like real credentials or something. So when someone's like, "Let me see your journalist credentials," it's like, I mean, if you want, I can go on Microsoft Word and go print something out or something. It's not like if you're like with a company, all of a sudden you're a legit journalist. That's not the way it works.
Or I can just give them a finger and be like, "Hey, look, here's my journalism credentials."
Damn.
Then you never get in anywhere. That's the magic "no one will talk to you anymore" feature right there. But
And honestly, there shouldn't be certified journalists either. Like, there's no such thing as someone who should be like a certified, like a designated journalist. That sounds like state-sponsored propaganda. That doesn't sound like a free press.
Yeah. Man, I always love it. Like, you don't like folks, someone said to me recently, you didn't get a journalism degree, so you're not a real journalist. It's like, I don't know how in the world that makes you a real journalist. It's like, do you really have to have a journalism degree? You have to go get a bachelor's degree and spend 4 years in college and sink 40 grand into simply writing articles and doing research? I mean, you don't have to know a lot to be able to do it, like you just have to have some common sense and general principles, and that's about it. It's not hard.
And also, why would you want to get indoctrinated into the way that the big boys do it? Because apparently the big boys aren't doing it right anymore because nobody's listening to them.
Exactly. It's like, why that? Like, I want to get a journalism degree so that way I can go and be a major company's lapdog, which is paid for or owned by some sort of a major corporation or a family, and then you don't even do news. You just spout the crap they want people to hear. It's like, that's not even journalism.
If I wanted to be a parrot, I could have, gone and, joined like the circus or something.
I don't think that's how you become a parrot. But maybe.
I mean, it's one way. I mean, I'm sure there's other ways. I mean, there's probably other ways to become a parrot.
Well, you can just become a parrot by eating bird feed.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
And also, someone said basket weaving is a degree in college. I think basket weaving is a course. I don't think you can actually get a degree in basket weaving. I'm not sure on that one. I've heard that before, but when I was in college, there was actually a basket weaving class at the college. I saw it once, but there was never a degree in it. You could just get like a credit for it, and go to the class. But that was about it. There were a lot of classes, actually, like a whole bunch of them, and a lot of them were like elective stuff. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see this Russian shed getting obliterated near Pokrovsk today, too. And here they come. They're coming on down, and
Oh no, the Russian shed. I was thinking today, the Russians, they're not good, like when it comes to engineering stuff, especially stealth. They're not really good at that. If they wanted to create like stealth for these tanks right here, I'm not trying to give them ideas or anything like that, but they could simply just cover these turtle tanks in, Epstein documents, and nobody would ever see the tank then at that point if you did that. Like, they would never see it. The tank would be invisible, and nobody would want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Or better yet, you could just put the word list in bold white font on top of the very like shell of the shed, and then they'd be like, list? What the hell's that? I've never heard of that before. It certainly can't be military related, and then they miss it. But moving on from that and down to the Zaporizhia, we also got to see these electronic warfare systems getting destroyed. Okay, there's some more music. And we can see here the electronic warfare systems continuing to be targeted.
Also, by the way, I have to give credit here, and some people are going to be pissed with this, but Elon is the one that actually put out the joke like that. So I kind of stole the joke from Elon. Unfortunately, I hate to admit, I wasn't following Elon on Twitter, by the way. I just happened to see it. But somehow Elon's posts have a way of making it into your Twitter feed, no matter if you're following him or not, which is kind of a little bit suspicious. But I saw it, and I had to reuse it. It was honestly not too bad.
Also, I saw someone, of course, take offense to what we were saying about journalists. You were criticizing journalists who put themselves into the story, like posting reports from the war front. No, we weren't, if you were paying attention. I believe your listening or reading comprehension skills might be low. We weren't criticizing those people. We're criticizing the people who sit in an office and literally do no research or no effort, and they put out lame-brain stories. That's what we were criticizing, which are generally everyone at Fox and CNN. I haven't really seen a lot of war journalists at Fox and CNN lately that go out there, and if they do, they don't even get into a place that is dangerous. They stay 30 or 50 miles away, and they'll sit there and go, the distant sound of artillery. They're not like the war journalists of old, like the true OGs that actually would go out there in places like let's say, for example, Sarajevo in Serbia, and actually be in the middle of the siege of Sarajevo. They don't do that anymore because I don't believe they can get those people insured, so they don't send them in anymore in a place like that because they can't get insurance. So what they do is that they put them so far away that they hear the faint sounds of battle, and then they write a story from there. And they don't really give you any details about anything going on, because if you look at any CNN piece that they do on a war, they'll be 20 or 30 miles away, and they'll go, the distant sound of artillery breaks the silence. Some Ukrainian soldiers pass by on a truck. Life here is very desolate. And it's like, you're not actually, like, there. Like, you're 30 miles away. You're not even, hardly even in artillery range, or at all. You're so far away, not only the biggest guns could reach out there, and the chances of them hitting anywhere close to where those folks are is small. So, you know, like not dissing on those particular people, but dissing on the mainstream news organizations these days, yeah, they're not up to snuff. Like, that's just the truth of it. If you don't like that, sorry, but that's the truth. But anyways, moving on from that.
Also, if we ever had the funds, like, we'd obviously have to grow much larger as a channel to be able to afford to do this. But I would volunteer to go on the ground, like in some of these places. Like, obviously, I wouldn't be going to Iran to go report because I don't want to die. But if it was somewhere that I could go, like Ukraine, to report on it or something, where I wasn't literally, in the line of fire or something, I would actually like volunteer to go do that. That would be actually very, very good to add that perspective to the channel as well. It might disrupt things a bit on the stream, which would be a little problematic. But if it was worth it enough, it could be pretty good addition.
Yeah, I would say so. But let's see. I see some people. Let's send Enforcer Matt to the war zone. I would also go as well. Problem is that if I go, the whole show and everything ends like until I come back. So that could be an indefinite period of time. But I would also go. Problem is that costs loads and loads of money to do that. And also, generally with most companies, like with the company side of things, most companies want some form of insurance for their journalists who are doing that. And a lot of insurance companies don't actually insure those people anymore. And that's why a lot of those people have ended up going to the wayside, is because a lot of the main companies that would have had the money to send people into dangerous situations like that can't even get insurance for them. So they just decide not to do that. And if they send them over there, they send them to a place that's relatively safe. It's close, but far enough away that you're only hearing the faint sounds of an artillery shell landing here and there, and it's dozens of miles away. But moving on out of that frontline news and on up into Kyiv, it's time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this day of the war. And it was quite a lengthy one, because he actually gave a speech at a session of the Verkhovna Rada. And so, let me make sure to get the English subtitles on here really quickly. And English. And without further ado, here's the speech.
Speech!
Speech!
Шановні народні депутати, за парламентською традицією я пропоную розпочати роботу з виконання Державного гімну України. Шановні колеги, сьогодні триває 1240-та доба повномасштабної збройної агресії Російської Федерації проти України. Ворог не припиняє підступних атак, б'є по наших містах і селах, по цивільній критичній інфраструктурі, по всьому, що тримає наше мирне життя. Тому прошу вшанувати хвилиною мовчання світлу пам'ять полеглих захисників і захисниць, а також невинних мирних громадян, чиє життя обірвалось внаслідок рашистської агресії. Дякую, прошу сідати. До слова запрошується президент України Володимир Олександрович Зеленський.
Слава Україні! Дякую. Дорогий Руслане, шановний пане спікере, шановні присутні, шановні народні депутати України, шановні урядовці, всі присутні. Сьогодні вже 1240-й день повномасштабної війни. Україна стоїть у війні проти Росії за свою незалежність. Довше, ніж будь-хто у світі очікував. При цьому від першого дня ми зберігаємо повну керованість державних інституцій, всі системи реально функціонуючої держави. Ми забезпечуємо фронт. Це дуже важливо. Тільки збільшуємо власне українське виробництво зброї. Ми проводимо власні оборонні операції на території ворога. І завдаємо реально відчутного болю Росії за цю війну. Ми пройшли вже 3 зими повномасштабної війни та захистили Україну від російського бажання вбивати нашу енергосистему. Ми зберігаємо всю необхідну Україні логістику. Ми розбудували та підтримуємо, попри будь-які турбулентності, глобальну коаліцію підтримки нашого народу, підтримки України маємо найбільшу в історії нашої держави кількість та якість друзів та партнерів України в усіх частинах світу. Ми здобули для України кандидатство в Євросоюзі. Та розпочали перемовини щодо вступу. Україна має бути готова по всіх перемовних кластерах, і доля подальших перемовин щодо вступу буде залежати тільки від здатності Євросоюзу виконувати обіцяне. Вперше в історії України створені та працюють такі моделі оборонної міждержавної співпраці, як данська модель, що передбачає залучення іноземних інвестицій в українське оборонне виробництво. Це масштабні проєкти на мільярди доларів. Ми виконуємо всі соціальні зобов'язання і навіть у час повномасштабної війни проводимо індексації пенсій та інших соціальних виплат. Україна має достатні золотовалютні запаси, має всі основи для проведення самостійної політики та подальшого захисту нашої державності, суверенітету та незалежності. Кожен з цих фактів – це результат патріотизму та ефективності конкретних людей. Це результат наших воїнів, які героїчно б'ються заради нашої держави і знищують окупанта. Це результат кожного і кожної в нашій державі, хто працює заради оборони та заради стійкості України, заради того, щоб українці могли жити. Це результат усіх, хто рятує та захищає життя в Україні. Я пишаюся усіма нашими людьми, мільйонами українців, які зі своєю державою. І це результат роботи самої держави. Я дякую урядовцям на чолі з Денисом Шмигалем. Дякую дуже, Денисе, за те, що пройшли цей шлях, пройшли саме так, пройшли достойно. І я дякую кожному з усіх вас, шановні народні депутати України, хто підтримував і підтримує роботу українського уряду. Хочу ще раз повторити, сьогодні вже 1240-й день повномасштабної війни. Ми всі хочемо миру. Якнайшвидше. І хочемо, щоб цей мир був для України справедливим. Водночас ми всі бачимо, як непросто зберігати достатню підтримку світу та як багато у світі спалахує інших війн та криз, що розпорошують реально глобальні зусилля. Отже, Україні потрібно більше власної сили. Ми трансформуємо управління сферою оборони та виробництвом зброї таким чином, щоб за півроку відчутно збільшити частку саме української зброї, доступною для наших воїнів. Зараз з усієї зброї в руках наших воїнів близько 40% зроблено в Україні. За півроку має бути не менше, ніж 50%. Оновлений уряд України має провести аудит всіх домовленостей, угод, меморандумів з партнерами у сфері оборони, оборонного виробництва, усіх програм стійкості, щоб виконати домовленості на 100% в інтересах України. Будуть і нові угоди зі Сполученими Штатами Америки, що посилять позиції України і заради яких нам потрібні зміни у дипломатичній роботі з Америкою. Ми маємо гарантувати нашим воїнам впевненість у забезпеченні сил оборони. Для цього збільшуємо, зокрема, внутрішній економічний потенціал України. А це неможливо без трьох речей. Перше – максимальна дерегуляція, ліквідація будь-яких бюрократичних перепон, непотрібних державі інституцій, чиї функції просто дублюються. Друге – максимальне звільнення суспільних сил України та залучення потенціалу партнерів заради економічного зростання в Україні. Третє – справедливість, тобто багато в чому інші, більш сильні підходи до покарання тих, хто посягає на українську державність і хто краде український потенціал. Оновлення Кабінету міністрів України, загалом системи української влади забезпечить реалізацію цих завдань. Україна отримає більше власної сили. Я вдячний Юлії Свириденко. Дякую вам, Юлія. За ефективну роботу програм підтримки українського виробництва та українських підприємництва, цей досвід роботи Юлії заради нашої української стійкості та нашого економічного зростання має бути продовжений та масштабований як ключове завдання українського уряду. Розраховую на те, що програма урядових кроків буде представлена якнайшвидше та буде виконуватись в щоденному режимі. Кожен день має приносити Україні результат. Сили оборони та безпеки України будуть надалі отримувати увесь необхідний ресурс для захисту нашої держави, для захисту наших людей. Ми посилимо переговорний напрямок для справедливого завершення війни та гарантування реальної безпеки для України. Буде продовжена цифровізація всіх процесів та державних сервісів. Я очікую від уряду більш конкретного наповнення політики героїв, програм підтримки ветеранів, також сімей українських воїнів. Очікую від уряду впорядкування та значно більш реалістичного підходу до соціальної політики в Україні. І також вже готуємо разом з урядовцями, разом з нашими дипломатами, разом з РНБО новий рівень оборонної співпраці з ключовими партнерами. Україна буде серед топових глобальних донорів безпеки та виробників зброї. З метою повної та оперативної реалізації цих наших завдань я вніс за пропозицією депутатської фракції, яка має права коаліції депутатських фракцій у Верховній Раді України, подання про призначення Верховної Ради України Юлії Свириденко на посаду прем'єр-міністра України. Прошу підтримати це подання. Також я прошу підтримати і відповідні кандидатури інших членів уряду України, які будуть внесені за поданням прем'єр-міністра України, та кандидатури міністра закордонних справ України і міністра оборони України. Дякую всім, хто з нами, хто з Україною. Дякую всім, хто працює заради нашої держави і людей. Слава Україні!
Slava. And he doesn't have soft hands, boy. He's working 30 hours a day in the war-killing factory where he kills the war. But with that, that's the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1,240 of the news from around the world. And that's going to be moving us on to the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And to be entirely honest with y'all, that couldn't be any time sooner because that was a 2-hour and 20-minute long news segment. So, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so jumping into our final question segment here. Also, by the way, I found something hilarious and for something to show you like later on after the stream. I don't want to get into it here because we don't want to, get into all that junk. But anyways, jumping into our last poll of the night. This question says, Russia will launch a massive offensive with 160,000 troops along the front line soon. And what are your thoughts? Excuse me. About 48% said it will be difficult for both sides, while 37% said Ukraine will crush the Russian offensive, and 8% said Russia will crush Ukrainian offensives. And honestly, I think it's going to be difficult for both sides. When these offensives start, it's obviously not good for either side. It's not like Ukraine's going to crush the Russians, and the Russians are obviously definitely not going to crush the Ukrainians because they're going up against some very heavy defensive lines. So I'm with the 48%. It's going to be difficult for both of them. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 48% as well. I think it's going to be fairly difficult. But with that, I hope we addressed that well. And also, Matthew, was one of your statements in the live chat about whatever it was that was funny?
No, I'm just going to send you the link in Discord so you can take a look at it.
Okay, I'll take a look at it here really quickly because now you've piqued my interest, and I don't think I can wait. I got to know now. So really quickly, send it over, and I'll take a gander at it really quick. That ain't good. That's not good.
Yeah, what a joke.
Yeah, well, that's a joke. 2,000 views. Dang, man, they're going for a record flop. But anyways. With that, we always know that they all band together, Matthew. That's the old saying. They all band together, and look at where they are. They didn't really make it far. But moving on from that, it is time for us to get on into the questions themselves. So what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so jumping into our questions here. This one, the first super chat, is going to go to none other than Lord Cog, who threw in the largest super chat of the night. And thank you so much, Lord Cog, for that $150 donation.
Holy moly.
And we appreciate that very much. And of course, that massive support like that helps keep the channel running every single night. And we do appreciate it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the incredibly massive support, Lord Cog, an old guard and a channel legend who supported this channel tonight massively. And I got to thank you incredibly for that. And I also have to thank you for helping this channel to keep on rolling. Funnily enough, you've helped us to keep rolling long enough to end up becoming one of the largest channels, at least covering world news at the moment on YouTube. Well, at least kind of like in our sphere. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, we wouldn't be able to keep it running, and we're entirely honored and appreciative of you helping this channel to keep rolling. You didn't throw in a comment, but we are massively appreciative, and we know that you have plenty of kind words to say if you had thrown in a comment. So a huge thanks to you once again, and also everyone is insisting, Matthew, that we spill the tea.
Can I spill the tea? I can do it in a way that's not going to like re-fire up a beef or something like that.
Please,
keep it kind of neutral.
Please make sure to follow party lines. Otherwise, we will have the party security come after you and make sure that you're following party protocol. But please go ahead.
So basically, I'm going to say this in code language. Unfortunately, if you're new to the channel, you're not going to really understand what I'm saying, but that's okay, though. We're not trying to get everybody embroiled in a new beef or something. I'm just saying this for the people asking that have been here for a super long time. Basically, Hot Dog Man had a bone thrown his way, basically, by someone that everybody's familiar with on this channel, which we're not going to name. And the bone turned out to be made of dust because it apparently evaporated as the bone was thrown to Hot Dog Man, and it only got 2,000 views. So I think Hot Dog Man was hoping for something much larger, but Hot Dog Man did not get what he was looking for. So, yeah, I'm not going to go any further than that. I don't even have a desire to go further than that, but I did find it funny, though, that apparently a individual here that we're familiar with decided to throw him a bone, and it didn't even help. The bone didn't even materialize. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to say that it is interesting to see, but to be entirely honest, 2 flops don't make a success. That you generally have to have something about you, like, just to quickly say this, to actually be personable. And Hot Dog Man nor the other person really has that going for them. So kind of like 2 flops make a double flop. That's like the actual equation there. Honestly, you just kind of have to be good at doing what you do on your own on YouTube. And that's something that I cannot stress enough for anyone who is watching this channel right now that's starting your own YouTube channel. Never be reliant on doing collabs with other creators. That is a death sentence for a channel, because your entire brand, your entire career is literally built around riding on the coattails of someone else. So if they collapse, you collapse with them, and you're always stuck as so-and-so sidekick. Terrible idea. That generally is like, as far as like as a business sort of a standpoint on YouTube, terrible idea, speaking on a business perspective. But as far as that goes, that one channel that tried to throw him a bone is a channel that's been struggling horrendously lately. And then they bring on Hot Dog Man, who literally has been so discredited in pretty much everywhere he's existed that everyone doesn't even have anything to do with him. And then goes on to that. And then they get 2,000 views combined in 10 hours, which by all definitions is a flop for what they posted that on, which has like over 500,000 subs. It's like a little bit lame, but should have seen that one. They should have seen that one coming. But me personally, I'm not really that surprised to see that, honestly. But it is what it is. But I see a lot of people knowing who the Hot Dog Man is. If y'all don't know, Hot Dog Man is someone who we never mention the actual name of on this channel, because we found out that their general thing is rage baiting people and trying to get notoriety through their name being shouted out in responses. So we never mention the name of their channel, but they're an absolutely crappy person. Personally, for us, just to give you all like the very shortest rundown, and this isn't even getting into the weeds, this person is another YouTuber who doxed our house, encouraged his supporters to harass us. They tried to get us swatted when we were in law school with a claim that we were going to be conducting a heinous criminal act of a mass proportion, if y'all get what I'm saying there, that day, to try and get a SWAT team there to possibly shoot us, because they would be scared, maybe trigger happy. A whole bunch of things like that. Truly tried to have our lives ruined and destroyed simply because the guy didn't like us. And so we have nothing, like, I'll be honest with y'all, I have nothing but bad opinions about the Hot Dog Man or anyone who still affiliates with the Hot Dog Man. So whenever we hear that something he's done has flopped, it's a good day. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to Elvis, who throws in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, Elvis, for that $100 support. And we do appreciate that very
Hey!
much once again. He said, thanks for the ongoing insight to these conflicts. And this is because I know you lose half. And please advise how I can support without middleman and still ask a question.
And I thank you for the massive support, Elvis. And actually, YouTube doesn't take half; they only take 30%. But I do thank you for the massive support, though, Elvis, and helping this channel to keep on running. And if you wanted to support us without the middleman, the best thing I can recommend is our Patreon. The link is in the description below. We can't answer questions live on air through Patreon, but we can actually send you a direct answer to your message through Patreon, through the DM system that exists there. Sometimes it takes maybe a couple of days to get around to answering questions on there, because usually it takes a good bit, because there's a lot of people asking questions on there, and so I try and get out some time to actually answer the questions. But beyond that, that is probably the best way, because Patreon takes, I think it's like
A small amount.
Yeah, it's like 3% or something. It's not really a lot.
It's very small.
Yeah, it's wildly small. So if you wanted to actually support us and make sure that technically we got the most bang for the buck, if that was your concern, Patreon is the best way to do that, between YouTube Super Chats or Patreon support. It's just that with Patreon, though, if you ask a question there, we don't check Patreon throughout our stream. So if you ask a question there, we won't be able to answer it live on air, but we will be able to answer it once we get off air and get some time at some point to be able to go through and start answering everyone's questions. And so I hope that does address that incredibly well. I thank you so much for the support, Elvis, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying our insight into these conflicts. We try our best to provide the most insightful information into the conflicts, and I generally actually love to read about what's going on in the world, the different kind of cultural aspects, governmental sorts of institutions, their ideological systems, and all that sort of stuff. I find it incredibly interesting, and so we're always learning and reading about stuff and listening to stuff here in the background, and it makes this show one of a kind, because not really a lot of people have that kind of a deep-seated interest or curiosity in the topics that they talk about. There are very few, and they usually shine out as exemplars or great examples of good channels, and I feel like, not tooting our own whistle, we are one of those, because I know me personally, and on Matthew's end, we are always reading and researching something for something somewhere, and we're always learning a little bit more about everything going on in the world. And so a big thanks to you so much once again, Elvis. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Hokey Redneck, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support as well, and we appreciate that very much. He said, we could take the east coast of them, and they don't have troops there.
And I thank you for the support, Hokey Redneck. And we could take the east coast of Russia, but the east coast of Russia doesn't really serve a lot of value. Supply-wise, it's very far away. And also, there's really no easy way to make it from the east coast of Russia anywhere else into Russia. You would somehow have to travel along the southern border of Russia for thousands of miles to even make it to the Urals, and then into western Russia to really threaten them. So while we technically could do that, supply-wise, it would be a little bit difficult to maintain a large supply line like that, and secondly, there wouldn't really be anything that we could do beyond taking Vladivostok, or maybe another significant city within that area, and then just holding it indefinitely. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make it possible. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here, this is another massive support from Hokey Redneck, who throws in a $100 donation yet again, and huge shout out to you, Hokey, for the massive support amongst many different super chats tonight, and we do appreciate that very much. He said, can you explain how the draft lottery works starting at 18? And basically, the way it works is they actually use like real machines, like real lottery machines, to actually do this with the little balls and the numbers on them and stuff like that. It's really strange how it works. It's like the Titan lottery drawing machine, I think is what it's called. You can pull up a picture of it, Enforcer, if you want to show them what that looks like. It's called the Titan lottery drawing machine. But basically, the way it works is they call based on the birth dates of the registrants. So, for example, the first men drafted would be those turning age 20 during the calendar year of the lottery. And also, for example, if a draft were held in 2020, let's take that for an example. I'm taking this off the site, by the way. Those men born in 2000 would be considered first. The men turning 21 in the year of the draft would be the second priority. Then the men turning 22 would be the third, and so on until a man turns 26 years old, at which time he's now over the age of liability. So That's basically the way it works. It goes by age, and it starts with the youngest and then goes to the oldest, which is 26 in this lottery system. So, very odd way it works. Obviously, we've never gotten to see it. Thankfully, we never had to see it because a draft hasn't been called in our lifetime. And hopefully, one isn't called, but you never know. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that Matthew explained that pretty much perfectly. That's the exact way that it does work. And it's a system that hopefully we'll never have to see used. But if it is used, I'd be fine with being called up. Because people just don't get this. I don't know why people don't get this. If the country is calling you up to serve, it is a time of very large importance. Like, I know that some people are going to go, well, what about Vietnam? Maybe the questionability of the draft is something that could be brought up about Vietnam, but the fact of the matter is that the draft was going endlessly up until the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. I believe all the way from 1955 to 1975, the draft was, well, actually even before that, because it was also in effect during the Korean War. It was pretty much in effect since the end of World War II up until 1975, and random numbers would just be called, and you would go to serve. And that was a pretty common thing back then. And if the country is calling you to serve, it's an incredibly important thing that you do. The only reason that this country exists is because people are willing to fight for it. And if you aren't willing to fight for it, then you aren't, like, at least in my opinion, you aren't really, you really shouldn't have anything that you have in this country because you're not willing to even fight and protect what you have. Your family, your house, your money, your job, your land, your neighbors, your friends, anyone. Like, you're pretty much turning your back on all of them because it isn't about fighting, and here comes the old sayings, you're fighting for the rich man. Well, in communist countries, who are you fighting for? There's no rich men there. There's just the leaders of the country who end up becoming rich. Who are you fighting for then? Everyone's got to fight for their country. It doesn't matter if there's a rich man at the top or not. You have to fight for it because it's what you have and it's your country. And so I would hope that it never would end up happening. But if my number was called, I would go. I would be scared. Yes. Like, everyone would be scared. Like, honestly, if someone tells you that they're not scared and that they're fearlessly going to charge into battle, they're an absolute liar. Everyone's scared. Everyone can tell you that's been over there. Everyone gets scared. Fighting in a real war is terrifying. But if you're called, you have to go. It's our duty as citizens of the nation to defend what's ours and to defend our people. And also on top of that, I don't know why some people like this is something that's a little bit tough. If you are a father or a mother, really for the draft, it's really only fathers because women are not drafted. But if you're a father and you get drafted and you're not willing to show up for service, are you pretty much saying that you're not willing to fight to protect your wife and children? It's like what kind of a sign is that? It's like what if everyone in the country did that and we lost? And then we ended up under some kind of a foreign military occupation, and your kids got brutalized as well as your wife from an occupying force. It's like, so you were willing to let that happen and not defend their nation? Like, I don't really get the mindset of those kind of people.
But their feet hurt. Their feet hurt. They can't go.
Yeah, I heard that they have spurs in their bones. That sounds like they're good for the cavalry. Put them up on a horse. Put them up on a horse. They got built-in spurs. They ought to be able to get that thing going easy.
They've got a game leg. The leg that just it's just never worked right. The poor leg. It's just been such a cripple on their whole life. Like the way they walk with a little limp. They just can't quite do it. It's not like their hands and their arms work. It's not like they could operate a soup ladle or something. But that game leg that might keep them out.
Yeah, that game leg. Oh, that game leg. And I also saw someone say family men don't get drafted. They actually do. Family men can get drafted. In World War II, a lot of family men got drafted because at least initially they go for the citizens of the country that do not have a family at stake. They go for the most physically fit and the youngest. We put our prime up first. But once the prime go out there and they get on the fighting line, who's next? And then they have to start expanding the limitations, or at least decreasing the limitations to who is not in the draftable population to continue to get more draftable people, at least in a major war. So eventually family men will be called up to serve. But it's still beyond that, whether you're a family man or not, it's your duty to serve. Because without your duty to serve, we do not have a nation. It sounds like old style patriotism, but that's kind of the fact of the matter. And a lot of people who don't look at it that way are a little bit too self-centered and selfish, at least in my opinion, because they're not thinking about the greater good of our nation, our people, their families, their friends, and everything else that we hold dear in this country that is worth fighting for. They think about too abstract of a thing, like, like, oh, I don't like this politician. Well, too bad. It's still our country. Our people still live here, and this is everything that we know and we've come from. We still have to fight for it. But a big thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. But that'd be my 2 cents on people who do not agree with the draft, because I don't think it'll ever be called up. I hope that it wouldn't be called up, but if it is, it's a tough time for this country, and we have to do what we have to do. We have a job that we've got to do. But a big thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Honestly, if that ever happened, the best case scenario is just simply, honestly, turn off the brain for a second while you're going through the induction process, and then afterward, after you're too deep and you can't turn back, then think about okay, I'm a little bit scared now, stuff like that. But at least going into it, you can try to pretend oh yeah, I'm a badass and stuff like that. But once you show up though, and then the reality hits you, it'll I'm sure it'll hit pretty hard. Probably a lot of fear coming over people, but at least you can train though. You can train and get better and stuff like that. But it's still going to be horrifying. There's no way around it. And if you aren't horrified, then maybe you're just maybe psycho or something, maybe. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat. This one goes to Elvis yet again, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Elvis, for that support. And he said, take one from the live chat, and I'm sorry. And wait a minute, he said, and if I'm wrong, then I'm sorry.
Oh, I actually I don't know if you're wrong on anything. I don't think anyone said that. But let's see. Oh, I think you were talking about the 30% thing. Oh, that's perfectly fine. That was 50%, 30%. That's just a little minor detail, but I do thank you massively for support once again, the huge support that you've thrown in tonight, Elvis, and we will make sure to get a live chat in your own air. And so I thank you so much once again, and we will make sure to take one from the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the one from the live chat is going to go to none other than Kim Bennett, who said, what does a day in the life look like for the both of you preparing for a nightly stream? For me, it's simply going over all the stuff I've been reposting throughout the day on Twitter to be able to be at least knowledgeable enough about what's been happening throughout the day. On the days I'm not making a video, if I've already made a video for the day, I've already done all that prep work for the video, so I'm already up to speed at that point. But for the days I'm not doing a video, I go through and I read everything I can about every single major happening throughout the day, and then I also double check it with some of the mainstream sources just to get a take of where the legacy analysts are coming from, and I also will read all of our Twitter sources and also any personal sources that we have on the side as well to try to get a full picture. So that way, when we're asking polls, we can word them a little bit better, we can discuss them a little bit better, and at least I know generally where things are going. So that's what it looks like for me. And then if I have a video, that's a whole another round of work earlier in the day as well. So video days and stream days, that's pretty much a gone day for me. The whole day's gone at that point. But Enforcer, what about you?
For video days and stream days, my day is completely gone, and my process for doing a stream is a lot more arduous than Matthew's, because on my end, because most of the work on putting together the show end is the work I do, and then when I get on air, this is actually the easiest part for me because I just go through and pretty much belt out everything that I've ironed out before the show. But to explain what I actually do before the show, a normal day would look like around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I start getting ready. Generally, I sit there on the phone, I scroll through everything, and I go look at stuff, and I try and figure out the general gist of what's actually been going on over the course of the whole day. And I know a lot of people would think, well, you don't look at it all day, or at least ask that. And the answer to that is yes, I don't look at it all day. Doing this every single day, endlessly for 1,240 days, it does end up getting tiresome and fatiguing to look at it all day every day, so I generally compartmentalize it into just work, and that's what I do. So I remember everything that happened yesterday, I look over everything that's happened for the past 24 hours up till that point, and I go, okay, so all of these things have evolved in this way since everything that's been happening for the past 1,239 days, speaking about today, and this is the situation that we're in right now. So then I get done with that, I come down at 7 o'clock, and, well, local time, by the way, because the stream local time starts for us at 9, but around 7 o'clock, I come downstairs, I get on my computer, and then I start going through, after I've looked at everything, and I start putting it all on the map. I do a lot of picking these days. A lot of people remember back in the day when I used to say we would show literally everything. Nowadays, there's so much going on and so many different things going on. I have to pick and choose what we're actually going to show and talk about. So I go through and I pick the largest topics that I saw out of that past hour, and I actually start putting those down onto the map. Then once I put all of those down onto the map, I sit here and make a thumbnail, and while I'm making the thumbnail, I sit there in my head and I rethink it over and over again. Okay, these and these things happened. I think that that's this. These are clearly showing these sorts of actions. These things in the past happened the same way with the same sequence of events, either historically or in the time we've covering the news. That must be what's happening. That's just going to be the end result. Moving on to this, we're going to cover this way. We're going to cover this that way. I come up with a whole plan in my head. You can actually ask Matthew on this. Before the show, I will sometimes tell Matthew the actual sequence of events. I'll be like, okay, Matthew, here's what we're doing tonight. We are first going to be covering, like tonight, we're first going to be covering the U.S. threat on Kaliningrad. Then we're directly going to talk about the Russian financial economic situation. After we cover the big stuff in Eastern Europe, we're going to hop down and talk about the Middle East. Then we're going to cover the tiny stuff around the world in America and East Asia. And then we're going to go right into the detailed analysis of the Ukraine war front line, round out with a speech, and then go into a question segment. And so I generally have like a very baseline framework for how the show will work. And that's all being done while I'm also making a thumbnail simultaneously. Then while I'm also making the thumbnail and doing that, I'm also thinking a third line of thought on what the title for the stream is going to be that night. What are the biggest things that happened today? Usually the two biggest things. What and how in the world am I going to word that thumbnail and also title? And what is the general presentation going to look like? Because that's actually one of the most important things that I do on a nightly basis as far as the marketing side to the business end of this channel, is that news has to be sellable. So thumbnails and titles actually have to be grabbing in terms of attention. So you have to think of the two biggest things to happen in the day, and you also have to think about the most marketable way to show that off in the thumbnail. Because, you know, while we do cover news, and this is all news focused, at the same time, this is also a business. We do this as our daily livelihood, so we have to focus on it as a business as well, and our business is news. So we have to figure out how to... And Matthew, that came off the exact same way as that guy who said, I'm a businessman, and my business is crime. I said, I'm a businessman. And
crime, eh?
Yeah, and our business is news. So I have to think about how to market it. And generally, we've gotten really good at that over the past few years. We are incredibly good at marketing news and getting people to watch it. So then once all of that's done, I move on into the intro. I think I'm a Morse code. I use a Morse code translator for that, by the way. I don't actually know Morse code, folks. I still don't know it years later. But I use a Morse code translator. I change up the intro. And then after that, I do another cursory glance, once again try and remind myself of the general framework of the news, the big topics, what the thumbnail and the title are going to look like, and then after that I go into, go and get some coffee, and I sit around and have a little coffee break there for a couple of minutes, and while I drink that coffee, I chit-chat with Matthew and touch base to make sure that we're on the same page with the big things that happen. And then I also tell Matthew what the big topics were that I saw. Usually we're in agreement, those are the big topics, and then, you know, I'll give some, we'll like talk to each other. What do you think this is? I think this. I disagree. I think it's this. Or we'll be in agreement. And then we'll be like, okay, well, that would be a good poll to bring up on stream, because that conversation would be really interesting to have with everyone on air. And then once that happens, go ahead.
And also, you're forgetting, if we disagree on something before the stream, then I contact the handler, and then they tell us the answer.
That's actually true. We usually contact our handler in the CI. I'm just kidding, by the way. But beyond that, by that point, it's 15 minutes to stream time, and then once that happens, I always say, well, I'm going to go back here and get the show running, and I go back here into the office. I get onto OBS. I set up everything, the thumbnail and the title that I've already pre-thought or pre-made. I make the stream description within the last 10 minutes before showtime to make sure it's the most up-to-date to what's happening when we're going live. Then I get Matthew in a Discord call. We have like about 5 minutes before the show's live at that point. We once again rehash everything a little bit. We also just act stupid at that point to get hyped up to do the show. So we do a whole bunch of stupid stuff. Like I'd be like, oh God, you know, just stupid stuff. And then by that point, it's 1 minute to stream. And then we just sit there and wait. And at 9 o'clock, we go, well, 9:01 technically, local time, we go live. And then from then on, you see everything that I do on air. Matthew's stuff from that point on is actually hidden. Y'all don't really see most of that. But all the stuff that I do is actually what y'all visibly see on air. So that is actually the complete breakdown of what my day looks like just running a stream. And then if I make a video, I go through that whole process in a miniature form in the earlier part of the day to make a 20 or 30-minute long video. So
also one other thing as well. Miss Disa is correct. Miss Disa said the viewers have input too. Y'all would be surprised. I actually do some scanning ahead of time. Like I monitor some of the top viewers of the channel and see what they're saying sometimes. I will do that. Also, I do get a general read on the audience like beforehand, because obviously I interact with a lot of you throughout the day in DMs, also on Twitter as well. And I try to see what people are saying generally about certain things to get a wide perspective of different viewpoints on situations. That helps influence the poll questions, actually, because if I know what a lot of you are saying and thinking, I can tailor poll questions that'll be more appealing to a wide variety of people. So I do that as well. And I talk to a ton of people like from the channel that are top channel viewers on a daily basis in the DMs on Twitter, sometimes on Patreon, not so much on Patreon these days. It's more the Enforcer's wheelhouse, but mainly on Twitter. And also on Discord as well, actually, to get a gist of what y'all were thinking. So that informs the polls and also helps me to come up with questions and also some answers to put in the polls as well, because the polls become an easy way to guide discussion throughout the stream. So that way, when the news topics are being hit in the Enforcer's heading, we can double up on things that we might have missed in poll questions. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it's actually a really in-depth process. I saw someone say I'm exhausted just hearing about it. And to actually explain a little bit about how my life has evolved through the years, it is exhausting mentally. It's not physically exhausting, of course. I sit in a chair all day, but it's very mentally exhausting to have to come up with about at least guaranteed 2 hours of continuous monologue on my end through a whole show. And Matthew does add in a good bit through that. And then I also have to be mentally prepared to provide smart, quick responses to whatever he's bringing up. And usually he brings up really good points. So I have to also think and analyze on the spot to come up with really good responses and analysis and literally just pull stuff out of the back of my brain and throw it to the forefront to be able to talk about something that I wasn't ready to talk about then. So it's mentally exhausting enough for me that generally I completely divide working on videos and streams from my normal life. At this point, I don't talk about anything, hardly ever, very rarely, and if I do, it's for a very short amount of time in the middle of my day when I'm not working about anything going on in the world as far as news. Very rarely do I ever. No Microsoft Defender, I'm good. But very rarely
you know something that's becoming a problem for me is I've realized yesterday, excuse me, I realized yesterday that I'm waking up and I'm literally like living like on Twitter these days. I wake up literally the exact moment I wake up out of bed. I immediately grab the phone and I immediately go to Twitter and I immediately start researching like the moment I wake up. And I realized yesterday, I'm like, why do I wake up every single day and feel like the days are blending together so much? It's because I'm on the phone too much. I was like, I got to cut back a little bit. So I've started trying to do the Twitter research in chunks instead of throughout like a continuous flow throughout the day, which seems to have helped a little bit today. But like I live like doing research every single day. Even when I'm not doing the video, I'm still doing research like crazy, posting on Twitter, because you have to stay up to date on the stuff, because if you don't, you start missing it. The Twitter post might disappear, they might expire, and then you won't see the news, and then you're missing a huge chunk of the stuff you're supposed to be researching. So that's why. Like if you're on our Twitter page, you'll see I tweet throughout the day, literally hour by hour, every single day. Honestly, I'm kind of like an addict at this point. I think I actually am addicted, because when I don't have my phone nearby and I don't have access to the Twitter, I feel like I'm losing it. Like I'm like, I gotta have it. It's really honestly quite bad. I got to reel back a bit.
And also another thing, I have to explain this too, because Matthew explained what he did for video. So all of that's what I did for a stream. I didn't explain what I do on a video day when I have a video to make, because also like Matthew, on video days specifically, I wake up, and as soon as I wake up, I flip over on the bed onto my belly, and I whip out my phone, and I start flinging through the Twitter. And I start looking at everything, and I try and figure out, because usually by then on those days, because it kind of like alternates who sleeps later and who sleeps or gets up earlier, and whoever's making a video or whoever's video day it is, they get up earlier. So I'm up earlier. Matthew hasn't done anything yet. Sometimes. So I'll be scrolling through the Twitter at that point going, okay, these are the big things that happened today. Then I have to come downstairs just to explain. This is the exact same process that Matthew and me go through. So this is identical for both of us on a video day. I come down here, right after I woke up, like 20 minutes after I wake up. So, right to work as soon as I wake up in the morning. No prep, no eating, no nothing. Straight to work. Sit down, and I put everything onto the map. Then I sit there, and because I'm, just woke up and I'm tired, I sit there for like 40 minutes, and I just look at them over and over and over. I'm like, okay, which one's big? Which one isn't? Which ones are going to be the ones for the titles? And then I'm like, okay, these are the ones. I think this is what I'm going to make the thumbnail like. And then I click record, and I do usually my videos in one raw take. No cuts, no nothing. Get done with it. Take that, edit it down the dead spaces at the beginning and end. Download it, make a thumbnail, and then upload it to YouTube and get it out as quickly as possible. And that whole process, that sounds like it's a short process. That whole process actually takes about 2.5 to 3 hours on any given day. So when I'm making a video one day, I'm doing all the stuff I'm doing for a stream and all of the time involved in that. And then I'm also doing a video as well, which is like a miniature short form live stream, at least in terms of work. So that's basically what we do, or what I do on my end specifically, but that's basically in a nutshell what we're both doing every single day that we're running this thing. So, I hope that answers
Also, I can tell you all this, but I see some people saying, Destiny Etchinson said, you open your phone and see the world on fire. That's another thing I realized yesterday, too. I will say this. If you live on Twitter and you get this constant flow of information 24/7, every single hour on the day, it will have an effect on your mental health. I can tell you that for a certainty. I start realizing it after a couple of days of being way too overly engrossed in it and trying to follow it too closely. I realize, I think this is having an effect on me because I'm starting to have like a more pessimistic view of things. And that's when I realized, okay, you're going to back off a bit because otherwise you're going to start, honestly, start getting depressed, like seeing this bad news coming out on a 24/7 basis. It does have an effect. Luckily, though, in the recent times, we haven't been exposed to as much of the foul footage that we used to be exposed to, or at least I haven't. The foul footage, we're getting better at filtering that out. And also on my end, I'm getting better at filtering it out because we don't want to expose ourselves to, terribly bad graphic content constantly, because that does have an effect. It's proven. So that's just another thing as well. If you live on social media too much, especially keeping up with modern current events, it will like drag you down after a period of time. You got to be conscious of that.
Generally, as far as Matthew, he's not seeing a lot of that stuff. I still see it every day, because generally, I still look at the gruesome videos because I kind of have to know, because if I have to go into a deep analysis on the Ukraine war, I still kind of have to know what's actually going on, like at least on that level. So I still see a lot of the gruesome stuff, even still to this day on a daily basis. But how I compartmentalize it is that's kind of my job. And once the job's over, that's done with. Like sometimes I have nightmares about it, like because some of it's pretty nasty and ugly. And no matter how much detached you are watching a video, so eventually your mind will start to just play tricks with you, and you'll start to sit there and you'll have a nightmare where you're in one of their positions, and you end up dying in that way or something like that. And then you wake up in a hot sweat and everything. But beyond that, I just go, that is my job. That is what it is. It's very unfortunate, but the world is on fire every day. When I'm not working, I've just got to be appreciative that the world isn't on fire in my corner of the world right now, and take it not for granted. Really appreciate and enjoy my free time that I've got, because thank God this part of the world isn't on fire yet. Might be in the future, who knows? But for now, it's not. Got to appreciate that and enjoy it while I have it. And that's generally how I compartmentalize my life, to make sure that it's not just all consuming for me. So if you ever catch me off air in real life and you're like, oh, what's going on here and there? I hate to tell y'all, I'm like, oh, because like I gotta mentally really get the gears grinding, because I get my gears grinding at specific times for this sort of stuff. So when it's outside of my work cycle, I'm like, oh dang it, someone asked me a question, and then I gotta really grind my gears to try and get an answer going. And then I'm like, oh, this is exhausting to do this outside of the times I've mentally allotted to do it. And so
Man, I love talking about it throughout the day. Like when people discuss stuff. Now, sometimes I will say though, sometimes people do reach out, and I'm a little bit too busy and I don't have time to really talk. That happens actually quite a bit these days, but not so much back in the day, but it happens more so now. I personally love talking about it outside of the stream, because usually, like I obviously like coming to my own conclusions, like as I'm reading the information and looking at these stories, I come to my own conclusions. But as I discuss it with other people, though, and people start asking questions, it lets me sort of like expand upon it a little bit more. So that way, by the time we get on the stream, I have more points to bring up when we're talking about it at certain points. But when I start getting on the stream right here and I'm like fresh on it, it takes a little bit longer to like kind of get in the groove of it, to really start thinking deeply about it, if you haven't already been primed earlier in the day to start like, developing more thoughts about it.
Yeah, also someone said you got PTSD from videos. No, like when you see stuff that's gruesome, like it's like the best way I can explain it with how that works. It's like when you're a little kid and you watch a horror movie right before you go to bed. And then you go to bed and you think the monster's in your closet or it's under the bed. Your brain plays tricks on you. That's how I largely describe that. It's not PTSD or anything. That's from real life traumatic events. Not at all what I have. What goes on with me is that every once in a while, and I don't bring it on myself, it just happens. Like every once in a while, I'll have a dream or something like that, a nightmare, and it'll be something like I'm a tanker or something like that. The tank gets hit, it overpressures, you're coughing up your own lungs or something, you're crawling out the hatch and falling out of it, and you're that person that you saw in that video from like weeks, months, years ago, and then you wake up in the hospital, you're like, oh my god, it's like, oh well, thank God, it's just my brain playing tricks on me. Because it's thinking, like when you're sleeping, your brain is thinking about everything in your subconscious. And if you see that stuff every day and dozens of instances like that, you eventually start to think of it, in your subconscious, and you end up getting like a nightmare rarely every few months or something like that. And then it's like, oh, and then it's like, oh, thank God that's not, what's going on in my life. And I'm just having to cover it. It's unfortunate for the folks who are in that sort of a situation, though. But yeah, not PTSD. Like just stuff you see.
You can get PTSD, though. You can get PTSD, though, from watching traumatic content on video for a prolonged period of time. You can get it. Because if you recall back a while ago, there were people that were content moderators on certain social media platforms, and they saw that footage repeatedly day in and day out for an extended period of time over the course of months, and if not years. Those people would burn out from the job, and then they would leave, and then some of them would go and get diagnosed with PTSD from being exposed to so much graphic, horrific, traumatic content, even watching it on just a screen. So no, it can really happen, and you don't really realize it's happening until it compounds too much, and then you realize something's not quite right. That's why you got to be careful with it. Like that kind of stuff's not to be underestimated. You can actually have a real toll on your mind from just seeing it on a screen.
Yeah, but like I know for sure, folks, that I don't have PTSD. It's just that your brain thinks of it every once in a while and pulls it up out of the dark recesses of your brain where you buried it and don't think about it, and then you think of it again. And you're like, oh damn, and then you just move on. That's at least how I deal with it. Is that PTSD to me? No. If it is technically PTSD, that's unfortunate, but it's just the fact that life just got to keep on trucking on along. At least in how I deal with it. If that was PTSD, I don't think it is though.
Oh, also, by the way, I see a lot of people in here talking about like Old Warrior had mentioned PTSD, I believe, or desensitization for a second. I saw Pizza Mike saying, Matt, my grandfather who was passed, he was in Vietnam and he wouldn't talk about the stuff that happened in the war. We've known a lot of veterans. Like we lived down the street from a veteran, and when the 4th of July fireworks came around, the poor guy he had a meltdown. Like it was a bad meltdown. The explosions. Now that's a real life PTSD right there, like from a war zone. The explosions triggered it, and it's it gets bad. Like it's really like horrific to see like the real effects of like really bad PTSD in real life from veterans. I feel horrible for people that have PTSD. I also knew a fella in high school that was our JRTC instructor who had symptoms of PTSD as well, and you could see it trigger in him. His eyes would change. You could tell he went into almost like a trance almost. It was really wild. And things would trigger it, like loud sirens would trigger it. Like if a siren went off in the school or something, you would see him snap right into it. And he would go into this complete zone out mode and go bonkers. It's really just really sad to see.
Yeah, it is really sad to see. I feel for a lot of those people because the sort of stuff they went through was terrifying. But with that, I hope that does address your question, Will, about what our daily life looks like and a whole bunch of other stuff that you didn't ask about, but other people were, and it seemed kind of attached, so we wanted to answer that too. But still, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for caring enough to ask about what our daily life looks like, because a lot of people don't really hear about what we do behind the scenes every day a lot, or at least in great detail, and it's always fun to get to talk about it with you all and see that a lot of you are like, dang, that's everything y'all do. And it's like, yeah, it's, you know, it's not like a normal YouTube streamer where it's literally like, you know, like a Minecraft YouTuber where you literally just pop live on stream and start playing the game. Like, there's a lot of pre-show prep and a whole bunch of other things that go into doing this every single day. So with that, I thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to McTild55, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, McTild, for that $30 support, and we appreciate that very much. And he said, any ideas why Austria is not part of NATO?
It's this neutrality sort of a thing with Austria, much like Switzerland. They like to try and maintain themselves as a neutrally aligned country, and that's generally the reason why they are not NATO. But they also are not as militantly neutral as Switzerland, so it's kind of like a halfway there sort of a thing for them. They're not NATO, but they kind of are. So I hope that does address that the best I can. I thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And a great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a $20 support from Wubba. And thank you, Wubba, as well for that support. And he said, let's make it rain Jassums.
Well, if we need to, we can. But Jassums are pretty neat. Like, they are an incredibly cool sort of a system. Let me show you all this. That is the JASSM. Look at that thing.
Look at that. That thing is like low visibility. I'm not sure if it's actually like real stealth on this thing. Is it real stealth or is it low visibility?
It's a stealthy long-range weapon.
So it's not like legit stealth. Cover it in Epstein documents, though. You'd have that thing invisible, though. Like, just cover that thing up. Like this thing right here, I tell you what, it's going in. Call this little St. James. This thing's heading into the war zone.
I think this thing is technically low visibility, but it is not stealth. So near to it, but not exactly. But I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. And maybe there will be lots of JASSMs one day. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Gunfox, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support. And he said, May 10th of 1940, the Battle of The Hague was an important propaganda victory, as well as permitting the Dutch government the time to escape to Britain. Question from the chat, and September 19 and December 16th, 1944, the Battle of Aachen.
The Battle of The Hague was an interesting one because that was actually during the time that the Nazi Germans started to rip through the Netherlands and Belgium on their way down into France in the Battle of France. And I got to say that is one hell of an interesting one. As far as the one that I'm going to rabbit hole, though, on the Gunfox, it is going to be the Battle of Aachen, because that has actually been described by many, most historians, as pretty much the Western Front's Stalingrad. It was brutal. The city was almost completely destroyed in the fighting, and very few buildings survived into the modern day that were from before the battle. But it was horrendously... it was a horrendous battle. High casualties on both sides. The Germans fought tooth and nail to hold Aachen because it's the first city that the Americans reached across the German border in the entirety of Germany. So it was a very symbolic sort of a thing. And then right after that, they went into the Hürtgen Forest, which doesn't really exist that much these days. Here's some of the Hürtgen Forest down here, but most of it's now a strip mine. Like, you know, just being honest, it's a giant coal mine. But outside of that, the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest and the Battle of Aachen combined were some of the heaviest fighting that was seen in Western Europe in most of the latter part of World War II. And so I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have been able to keep it rolling to this day to do a little rabbit hole right there. So big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Zyper Sniper 1, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Zyper, for that support. He said, coffee fund for the enforcers. And if NATO takes Kaliningrad, who would get it after the war, and how would it be split?
That's a good question, actually. If we took Königsberg, which is Kaliningrad, I think we ought to just let the Russians keep it. And that sounds like it would be a little bit weird to say, but the Russians transplanted everyone out of the region. Well, pretty much transplanted them all into East Germany, and then they colonized the region with Russians. So ethnically, all of Kaliningrad is almost entirely Russian. Like, I can actually show y'all Kaliningrad demographics really quickly. And let's see here. Let me see if I can find y'all the ethnic demographics of Kaliningrad, because you'll actually see it's majority Russian. Let's see here. Geography, climate, demographics. Let's see, there's 1 million people in Kaliningrad, and if I can find y'all, here we go. Russians make up 78.6% of the Kaliningrad Oblast's population, and beyond that, pretty much everyone else that makes up a non-measurable number. And so, in my opinion, it wouldn't really make much, it wouldn't really be worth much to actually incorporate Kaliningrad into, say, Poland or Lithuania or even Germany, which historically has the greatest land claim to Kaliningrad because it's East Prussia. That's actually where the Prussian state originally came from, if y'all do not know, is from Kaliningrad or Königsberg. And then they would end up expanding out into this area of Germany and East Germany around Berlin, Magdeburg, Brandenburg, all of those sorts of places. But outside of that, I generally think that they ought to remain Russian because pretty much everyone there is a Russian now. So it would cause a lot of cultural tensions because whoever would have this area incorporated into their country, they would be homogeneously Lithuanian or Polish, and then you got this giant Russian population now being thrown into their country. There's going to be a whole bunch of riots, terroristic actions, all that sort of stuff that would result. So it'd just be better to let it stay Russian, in my opinion at least. So I'd keep it Russian. But I would also make it to where if we took the region and then the Russians got it back at the end of a war, that Russian armed forces could not be stationed in Kaliningrad from then on. Period. It would pretty much be a demilitarized zone, a lot like post-World War I Germany had a demilitarized Rhineland. It would be a similar sort of a thing. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I do thank you for supporting and helping this channel to keep it running and supporting our coffee fund. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, we have another super chat from Elvis, and he puts in another 50. And also a huge shout out, by the way, Elvis, for that massive support tonight. I think you've thrown in. Let me check here. Let's see, let me try to do this math in my head. I think you've thrown in almost $300 of support tonight. So that is absolutely massive. And thank you very much, Elvis, for that massive support. It does really mean a lot to us. And he said, are all young men from Alabama as educated as you? And if so, the state gets a bad rap. Now, I'll say this for the enforcer answers. There are smart people from Alabama, by the way. Just because Alabama has that stigma, I'm fully aware of the stigma, by the way. The stigma is well earned in some places in the state. Like, honestly, it is well earned. There's some ignorant people that live in Alabama, without a doubt. But we also are home to some very smart people as well. Like, for example, a huge cluster of them is in Huntsville. We have a huge defense industry in Huntsville. And obviously, we have people at the Redstone Arsenal, and they are very good engineers and also rocket scientists there as well. So there are smart people here. But the catch is, though, when you get to the parts of Alabama that are ignorant, it is ignorant like nothing you've ever seen before. So that's why it gets the bad rap, because there's extremes on both sides. Very smart people and very not so smart people across the board. So no, we're not an exception in Alabama, but thank you very much for the kind words. But Enforcer, what say you?
And that's also what I would have to say. Generally, Alabama does have smart people in it. There are a decent amount of them, especially in places like Huntsville, where the Fed money comes in and the weapons flow freely like water. But there are also some smart people down in places like Mobile at the Airbus manufacturing plant, and also a great deal of other smart people throughout the state. But in general, when you do run into the ignorant people, not only are they ignorant, they're also violent and they revel in the ignorance. And I don't know what it is with that, with some of these folks, because it's like, just because, you're like from Alabama, it doesn't mean you have to be an asshole. Because I used to think growing up, because we didn't really get to deal with anyone growing up, folks, just to say that we pretty much were forced to never deal with anyone, whether we wanted to or not. So we really didn't get to deal with a lot of Alabamians growing up. So generally my experience with Alabamians comes from the years of 18 years old, not even then, really like 19 years old and onwards. And generally, I always had this idea in my head of, oh yeah, the South, we have to be very polite because we're always known around the world for Southern hospitality. So I'm sure everyone out here is polite. And over the years, I have started to learn that that's certainly not the case. And if you're talking about percentages, I would say about 20% of the people in Alabama are nice, and 80% of them are about the meanest, rudest, angriest people you ever met. From my travels around the country, that would generally be the case. It's exceptionally so down here than anywhere else. But to those 20%, not all of them are incredibly intelligent and well off. Like there's still people who are, the salt of the earth folks, your average hardworking Americans that keep this country running, and they're also nice people as well. They're not Einsteins or nothing, but they're still great folks. But for the other 80% or so, they are damn angry. So it's not like there's like maybe like 3 people in the state who are maybe I wouldn't say we're smart. I would say I'm pretty good at reciting what I've read. But I do thank you for the support and open this channel to keep on running. But that would be the best answer that I could give to that. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Mr. Biscuit. And Mr. Biscuit said, great work as usual. And is there any way to find out what military supplies have reached Ukraine at the moment and what supplies are due to arrive in LSA?
Unfortunately, the best way we can get that is through snippets of information that come out through the grapevine, which makes it a little bit more difficult to follow. And generally, major studies that are made several months apart from each other. Those are the best ways that we can find out, but there isn't really a consistent day-to-day sort of a scale or a graph that shows what's been sent and what's not been sent yet. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Gabby White, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Gabby, for that support as well. And Gabby said, Enforcer Matt, thanks for the channel and all the hard work, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the kind words and the support, Gabby White. And we thank you greatly. And of course, Slava Ukraine, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Koopy, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Koopy. He said, absolutely love the channel. And best part of my day is when you guys are live. And that's very kind words of you, by the way. Honestly, the best part of my day is when we are live on the channel as well, to be perfectly honest with you. I love doing it very, very much. I'm glad that y'all love to be here as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd agree. This is the highlight of my day most every day, because we have been able to cultivate an incredibly great place here. It's one of a kind, like on the internet and in the world in general. So I really enjoy doing this every single day. It's tiring sometimes on the mental side of things, and it does wear me down here and there. But still, I would never be anywhere but here. And so big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $20 support from Ed Kent. And thank you very much, Ed, for that 20. I do not see a comment attached, but we do appreciate that very much. And we also have a 10 from Nerd. And thank you, Nerd, as well, for that support. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank Nerd and Ed both for the support. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but we are still massively appreciative. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Naomamide, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Naomamide, for that support. They said, it's not right for people to stop and ask you questions. And I'd politely decline and tell them it's your day off. And the internet is readily available. And thanks for all you do. And honestly, I don't really mind it, me personally, like when people do that. I really don't mind. Now, I may not be super responsive, but I'll be honest with you, like Mondays really aren't even days off for us anymore. I'll be perfectly honest. One of us is making a video on Monday, and that's not really a day off. It's really an everyday thing these days, especially since we're on the video schedule and we're trying to stay on very consistent with that. It is every day. So, I mean, to me, I don't really need the day off. I would rather just have like a few days of vacation every once in a while instead of like having a set day off every week. Because honestly, I'd rather be doing this than just goofing off, to be perfectly honest. This feels a lot more productive. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to say, while it's like mentally exhausting whenever I'm whenever I'm clocked out of thinking about that stuff for people to ask questions, I will still answer them because I'm very honored that they would even ask it. Like the fact that people appreciate our show enough and appreciate our insight into this enough that they would go out of their way to ask a question on that. While it's tiring for me, I still understand the great deal of value and respect that they're giving in asking that question. So while it's tiresome to me, I'm still more than happy and very proud to be able to answer them. Because thinking about it from their perspective, thinking about it from my perspective, I'm tired, like mentally. I've clocked out, I've compartmentalized when I work on this and when I don't, and when I'm not, I don't think about it at all, or hardly little. But for them, on their hand, they are just seeing me for the first time. They hear about it when I'm talking about it, but they have a load of questions, and they don't have the time in their personal lives to be able to find the answers to those questions, so they count on us to get those answers for them. And they find us to be so intelligent on the matter and so well researched on the matter that if they were going to ask anyone in the world about that question, it's us. And to be in that kind of a position, it's one of high honor. And while I might be tired and mentally and not want to answer those kinds of questions, I still appreciate and respect that folks would go out of their way to think that we are knowledgeable enough to ask us a question like that. And so even still, while I wouldn't want to answer it, I'm absolutely honored by their question, and I will still go through the effort and the energy to be able to answer that question and give it the full 9 yards like I would on any super chat or question on air. And so I do thank you for the support, but beyond that, that's the reason why, even if I don't want to answer a question, if someone asks it, I'm certainly going to answer it. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jeremy the Hill, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, Jeremy, as well. He said, why didn't Carthage conquer Rome?
That's actually a very complicated question that spans over 3 wars. I don't even think I could get into that because we're starting to run out of time, but it's a very long and lengthy sort of an answer as to why Carthage could not win against Rome. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wantan Quadruple 8, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Wantan, for that support. He said, time to cleanse my eyeballs and brain from the mainstream media with some real enforcer news. And the whole government needs to be turned off and on again due to meltdown malfunctions. LSA.
Hey, an LSA, and I gotta thank you for support. And maybe so, maybe. It's getting heated up there for sure, so maybe they need to turn it off and turn it back on again or something, see if that'll fix it. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Elvis once again, actually. Elvis just threw in another $50 donation. And huge thanks to you, Elvis, by the way. Massive support, and we appreciate that. And he's got the number 1 next to his name, because if y'all weren't aware, YouTube started a brand new thing where they apparently rank the top fans in the chat. And oddly enough, the top super chatter becomes the top fan. So, we didn't choose to do it that way, by the way. That was YouTube choosing to do that. So I kind of have mixed feelings about it, but it is kind of cool to see like the little crowns in the chat. But also, by the way, I think I have 250 XP. So I got bumped down the leaderboard quite a bit. I'm a top fan of my own content. It sounds kind of narcissistic. But Elvis said, no questions, just pay the rent, and proud of you both.
Matthew, you are number 35 right now, by the way. And
of
also,
myself.
Yeah. And Elvis is number 1 with 17,775 XP. Hokey Redneck is second with 7,625, and Lord Cog is at 7,600. But I do thank you massively for support, Elvis, and thank you for helping us to pay the rent. You're helping us to keep the lights on, literally, and pay the rent, and I greatly appreciate you, and thank you for that. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than, guess who? Let me scroll up to it. This one goes to your Fubar, who puts in a 10. And they said, don't know if y'all read. I read a little bit. Said, but the U.S. developed its own kamikaze drone, like the Iranian drone. It's called the Lucas.
And let me go look at it. Look at it. Look. Oh, it literally is a Garan or a Shahed. Look at that. That's the Lucas.
Oh, that's ours?
Yeah.
Huh. That's I don't know why we'd literally copy the Delta Wing design and everything just like theirs. It's literally an identical copy. That's uncharacteristic of the U.S. We usually don't do that.
It's literally a Shahed, no joke. But still, I thank you for support and sharing that with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Hokey Redneck said, work on your XP. Honestly, I need to work on my XP. Like, I really do. 250 XP, I'm low on the leaderboard here. I'm getting bumped down. He said, I'm second. Let me look. Yeah, actually, you are second. You got 7,625 XP. Elvis got a freaking whopping 17,000 XP. I'm not really sure how these calculations are done, by the way, and I don't know how you can really increase it. I guess you can just chat more, maybe increase it. I don't really know how it works. I'm goofy. There's literally a question mark at the top that tells you how it works. So I'll have to read that later. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat. This one goes to Rad Doctor, who puts in a 10. He said, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Honestly, I kind of fallen out of favor of both of them recently, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Star Trek, because I found Star Trek to be a little bit more deep. And I like Star Wars, because it's kind of like that little cheat movie that you get to watch that's fun and it's exciting. That's pretty cool. But I actually like things like Star Wars: The Next Generation, where they explore deep philosophical topics through fictional space environment. It's an interesting sort of thing to me. So generally I would go with Star Trek, but a lot of them are also cheesy too. So, take that with a grain of salt. But outside of that, also, I just found out, Matthew, this is the best ranking system ever. Top fans and XP. What's the leaderboard? A place for fans to stand out in the community. The top 3 get special badges in the live chat. It resets every stream, so you can always try again. How do you get on the leaderboard? You'll need to collect experience points, or XP. Here's how you get them. Send live chat messages, or send super chats and super stickers. And super chats and super stickers appear to be the real way that you get XP, because a lot of people have been chatting all night, and y'all are like at the 200s. Elvis has thrown in a couple of super chats. He's at nearly 18,000 XP now. So I think that's generally the way that you get XP, is in sending in super chats. It's an interesting system.
That's kind of how the government works a little bit. It's like we're mirroring the government here. A couple of lobbying donations, and all of a sudden you got XP out the kazoo.
Yeah, or you have an island and some people get on a list and then you're on the top. But beyond that, one thing I do have to say though is that tonight Elvis is literally king. Like, he's number one. He's got the number one crown. Elvis is king. He lives up to his reputation. Pretty impressive stuff. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, I have like mixed feelings about that. I'll be honest with you. Like the whole ranking system, I've got my feelings are mixed on that. So I don't know. Like they've like I think some people like it, but at the same time though, I don't know. Like it's an interesting feature though. But anyways, jumping into our next one. This one goes to Spring Fauna, and Spring Fauna puts in a $10 super chat, and thank you very much, Spring Fauna, for that support. They said, love you guys and love our chat community, and thank you all for what you do here and here on Slava and LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for the kind words, Spring Fauna, and still being with us and still supporting this channel. And so with that, a massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jeremy Vahill once again, and he puts in a 10. He said, do we have an equivalent or better version of the Shahed?
Technically we have the same thing as the Shahed. I don't think it's better, though. I think it's literally identical or analogous to the Shahed. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Mr. Tampico, who puts in a 5. And he said, love you guys, and thank you. He said, thank you for all the hard work. And God bless the USA, God bless Ukraine.
And long live the Republic, and Slava Ukraine, Slava. And thank you so much for loving our work and enjoying what we do. And a huge thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Detroit Adam, who puts in a 5. And he said, best news show on earth. And LSA, and you guys rock, and thank you.
And thank you so much for the support, Detroit Adam. And thank you for enjoying the quote-unquote best news show on Earth. I don't know if it is, but I'll take the credit. And I thank you massively for support, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, I saw Famished Potato say my favorites was Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek The Next Generation. I would say that my favorite was Star Trek The Next Generation by far. I think that was the best one they ever made. And also some of the stuff that they would do, I would be like, oh, dang, that's so funny. That's like real life. Like one time, man, do you remember that episode where the Admiral showed up on the Enterprise? She was like, you're going to have to uproot the Native American population from this planet and force them to another. And Picard was like, we did that like, a couple of 100 years ago to him, and that was kind of messed up. She was like, yes, I know, but we actually had a Indian representative with us, and they voiced their concerns, but we ignored them. I was like, that's just like the Indian Board of Affairs in real life. I was like, that's kind of messed up. But like, they would like, not laughing at that because that's a funny thing. I'm laughing at it because it's so similar to real life to the way they wrote that. I was like, that's literally exactly how they did it in real life. Pretty messed up. But beyond that, I like that because they would always explore some kind of an interesting real life topic, but fictionalize it and put it into a setting in space several hundred years in the future where it was actually digestible. Unlike modern Star Treks, which I feel get a little bit too heavy into the current message that they want to send instead of really watering it down to where really any audience could digest the plot or the message that they were trying to send. I feel like The Next Generation balanced it the best and did it the most impressively, like at least in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And generally, I also would have to say I think Picard was the best captain by far, in my opinion, beat everyone else. And so with that, we were on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, also, by the way, it doesn't give you XP on every message you send, because I just sent one message a second ago. It gave me like 25 XP in the chat. And now I sent a second one, and it gave me nothing. It gave me 0 XP at all. So let me see something. Let's see here. Yeah, I sent another message. I didn't get anything. Like, it gave me nothing. Like, I don't know what the hell. Like, I guess there's a time limit on it or something. I don't know. But anyways, moving on to our next one. This one goes to the Wolfman, who puts in a 5. He said, participating in a reenactment of the Great American Scrimmage as a Union boy tomorrow. Love watching you guys and stay up to date. And love Ukraine and USA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, the Wolfman. I hope you have a great deal of fun with that. I think my reenacting days are largely over at this point, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. I hope you have a good deal of fun with it. And so with that, long live the Lee Spring Army and Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, Old Warrior said, "Where am I on the leaderboard?" Let's see. I'm trying to see. I'm looking through here. I don't know why I'm having a hard time like reading through it really quickly.
He's not on the top 50. I don't see him up here.
What? How? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't understand why, but like, that doesn't make any sense. But anyways, I'm not really sure how it works, folks. I wish I could explain it more. I'll have to do some more research into it, though. But jumping into our next super chat here, this one is going to go to, well, my spreadsheet just went crazy. Let's see. This one goes to Ben, who puts in a 5. He said, it seems like Russia doesn't support countries that are against Israel. And why is that?
Actually, they support countries that are against Israel, like Syria, like when Bashar al-Assad was president, and Iran. Let me think of another. My fellow Americans. I can't think of another because there's not really a lot of others that go against Israel in the region currently. The rest are a part of the U.S. security assurance sphere. But they do support them. And they don't like the Israelis. They kind of hate them. But with that, I do thank you for support and helping this channel keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Dark Sheep. And they said, have y'all seen Solo Leveling, LSA? I have not seen that. I think that is a show on Netflix, though. But I haven't seen it. But I think it's like something like some South Korean like anime thing or something. It was like the live action version of it. I'm not really into the animation stuff very much myself. So I'm not very familiar with it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't really watch a lot of anime, at least at the moment. No disrespect to folks who do, because I actually hear it's really good. It's just that I never had the time to get invested or interested in it before. But as far as that would go, I have not seen that one. I did pull it up. It is an anime, and for that reason, I have not seen it. The only anime I have ever seen would be that Studio Ghibli one that's called Spirited Away. I actually pulled up the name of the one I brought up last night with like the kid and her parents got turned into pigs. It's called Spirited Away. That's the only anime I've ever seen. Absolutely loved it, by the way. I thought it was a great sort. Like, you remember Spirited Away, Matthew, don't you?
Yeah, that was a creepy show, that one right there.
Dude,
that guy has a dark mind. That guy who's the Studio Ghibli like chief animator. Dude's got a dark mind.
But it was good. It was good. I remember this movie still. Like, I only watched it maybe twice. It was really, really good.
This movie haunted my brain.
Dude, I thought about it nostalgically forever. I was like, man, that was a good movie. Like, I didn't know the name. I actually got curious enough. I had to go find the name of it. But this is the only anime I have ever watched. But it was incredibly good. Like, very, very good in my opinion. I really liked it. It was very interesting. And so, like, generally, I have a good bit of respect for anime. It's just that I'm not really a big consumer of it. But with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 super chat that just came in from Jeremy Vahill once again. And thank you very much, Jeremy, for that support also. He said, have you watched Cowboy Bebop?
That is another anime, and unfortunately the answer is no. The only anime I've watched is Spirited Away by Studio Ghibli. And I think that's it, yeah. So that would be my answer, is no. But I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Brian Gonzalez, who puts in a 5. He said, not to scare, but Cybercom is a new theater and draft law is old. They might revise it or do alternative recruitment like World War II scientist defectors.
And thank you for the support, and we will have to wait and see for the large part. But a big thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Brian Gonzalez, who puts in I'm sorry, Brian. I actually read yours off already. I forgot to put a red check on it. But we also have a 5 from Pizza Mike. And thank you, Pizza Mike, as well for that support. We also have a 5 from Plazoth as well. And big shout out to the both of you for that support. And we also have a 5 from Dan Leviton, who said, appreciation for the work behind the scenes.
And thank you so much for appreciating the work behind the scenes. We're always happy to do it, and it's just a part of the daily grind. The stuff that y'all do not see that gets the show on air every day. So big thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Octavian Timorsanu, and he said, please take a question from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And we will take a question from the chat. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And what do we got, Matthew? In honor of Octavian Temerasanu.
And this one goes to Steve, who said, did Al-Jilani actually ever get everybody on board with a single government? And I think this is the civil war still playing out.
The answer is no. He never got the Kurds on board in the SDF, and it appears that the Druze hopped off board once they saw what he was about. Because they were actually on board for a bit until he did what he did, and then they hopped off board. And now they're trying to become a separate thing. So I hope that answers that well. A big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2. And LSA Sergeant Figment said, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order. We actually got to up to 4.7 thousand likes tonight, which is very impressive. And if y'all want to hit the like button, we'd be more than happy to see it. And so, a big thanks to y'all once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Wantan Quadruple 8 once again. And he said, here's the DLSA, Slava Ukraine, and enigmas will never age. Yeah, they never age, and secrets will remain secrets. Am I right? But Enforcer, what say you?
And we have a secret, and we'll keep it a secret because secrets are special. And here's to more secrets. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Wantan, Quadruple 8, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and Slava Ukraini, Huram Slava. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA. I don't know why I'm forgetting to click the red check mark, but thank you, LSA Sergeant Figment, again for that support. We also have a 2 from Tamerlan Chamberlain III, and also Mark Andre Burnett, who also put in $2 donations. But thank you both very much for that support, and we appreciate that very much. And now the Enforcer's putting the red check on the box for me. I appreciate that. We also have a 2 from Jeremy Vahill. He said, "What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?"
That never gets old. That never gets old. But I do thank you for the support, Jeremy Vahill, and thank you for having this channel to keep on running. And so a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the last super chat. Oh, actually, never mind. Second to last super chat of the night.
All right. Also, by the way, I'm surprised and disappointed that nobody got that reference at all. That was just in that last super chat. Like, I think only like one person in the chat got it, and that was a. I'm shocked. But anyways, our next one goes to Jeremy Vahill, who puts in the 5. He said, "Have you watched Princess Mononoke?"
Mononoke. I have not. I would have clear ignorance on that show, unfortunately, Jeremy Vahill. But I do thank you for support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $20 super chat from Old Warrior. And thank you, Old Warrior, as well for that support. He said, "It turns out I had that feature turned off in the preferences under the privacy tab under live chat. I didn't even know you could turn it off. That's also news to me."
I didn't know either. I didn't know. And also, Matthew, also, I do thank you for the support and having this channel to keep running. I hope that this addressed that well. And also, we're on to the next one. I don't know why we're starting to slip up here at the end, but we're on to the next one.
What happened?
What do you mean what happened?
Like you were about to say something, then you like jumped off of it.
Yeah, because I didn't even know where I was going with that line of thinking. I was like, I don't even know what the hell I'm saying. I'm turning into the current president and the last one. Oh my god! Oh, look, Jack, I want a mint chocolate chip ice cream. Damn it!
Damn. At least you don't have deep vein thrombosis, at least. But anyways, jumping into our next one. This one goes to 2 hot dog guys, 1 cup of snow. Puts in a 2. He said, "Slava Ukraine, LTLSA, and Pimp Marmot sound off."
What's up, bitches? Hey, we haven't done this in like forever. It's Alan the Marmot, the Pimp Marmot, and he's got a giant...
Hello there, Governor.
Hello there, Governor. What's going on, Rummy?
Hello.
Aw, man. Oh my goodness. There's no way in hell. Aw, man. I got brought on. It was my big break. I got 2,000 views. Aw, man.
Oh, the pig nipples.
Don't remind me of that. Oh my god. I wish we could tell y'all a little bit more about that without it turning into a whole damn YouTube war.
Don't start a YouTube war.
Yeah, we're not starting a YouTube war. It's not even worth it. But I wish we just to say this to y'all because it makes me feel a little bit better. I wish we could tell y'all more about that stuff without it turning into a full-blown YouTube war again. Because the stuff that happened was so stupid. I think y'all would be blown away with it. But we can't get into it because I just don't want to deal with that beef and drama and BS to just say a story. So fortunately we can't really talk about it much more. But it's the Pimp Marmot. And we all love the Pimp Marmot. And so with that, I hope they just addressed it quite well indeed. And also, man, we have one last super chat from Old Warrior. Oh, actually, we already addressed that one. Heavens. Oh, goodness, I'm losing my freaking mind here, Matthew. I'm losing it. But But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the live chat segment. It's that time. It's the most wonderful time of the stream, and it's time for us to get 3 live chat questions of the night. We've actually run overtime tonight, folks, so we won't be able to get all the live chats, but we'll at least be able to get 3 before we get off for the night. Oh, look, there's another super chat there. Blimey, Governor. Well, what do we got, Matthew?
So this one goes to Dunkle X. He said, last super chat, check out check out his library. The best movie director to come out of Japan, and their version of Disney for sure, and not much time investment compared to animes, and get some sleep. God bless the LSA.
And I got to thank you for the support and sharing that with us, that the Yoxie fella. And I got to thank you greatly for helping this channel to keep on running and sharing that with us. As well, certainly take a gander at it. God bless your soul, sir. And I got to thank you for supporting this channel and helping you to keep on running. Don't say sorry, Dunkle. We are appreciative of your support. It's just that I thought, every time I say that there's a final super chat, someone always proves me wrong. It's like, it's a blessing and a curse, because it does help us to pay our bills, but at the same time, it always lengthens the show by a couple of minutes. We're still happy for your support, though. I want to make that clear. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic. And with that, Matthew, it's time for us to get on into the Morse code decoders of the stream in the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps and the final 3 live chats of the night, all right?
All right. So jumping into our Morse code decoders of the night, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabella Garbo, and her royal fluffiness. They said the Morse code says to come be like, don't threaten. Why do I sound like that meme of Kameni about to go? And I was like,
that baby
can blow up my nuclear shit. But anyways, the Morse code says.
Also, by the way, it's supposed to be EUCOM, by the way, just
okay.
At the start.
Be like, EUCOM, be like, don't threaten because we will, something, they're on that business, LLT, LSA.
Bro, you wouldn't read that? You read the last
no,
one.
I'm not reading that.
What the hell?
Sounds sketchy.
What the hell? Anyways, ding, 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 ding. Y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct again. The Lee Spring Army Signal Corps is on that business. And y'all got it correct again. And so, a big thank you so much once again for y'all getting that correct. And I see a lot of people in the chat doing that whole, and I was like, that BB, touching my nuclear shit.
and I was like, this BB can't blow up my nuclear shit. I said, call the generals. They're dead, sir. Call the army. They're no more, sir. I was like, I can't even say the rest of it was too foul, but man, I wish we could shut down there so bad. That was hilarious. Like, whoever came up with that.
Oh man, it was actually pretty good. But with that, folks, we are on to the next one.
Also, Jeremy Hill put in it too. He said, can you redo the stream in a British accent?
I would love to, but people absolutely hate accents. Like, I know a lot of y'all do love them and adore them, but there are so many people that hate them. They go irate. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to ever do that. Maybe we could do that as, like, a Patreon thing one day. Maybe. But I do thank you for the support, helping this channel to keep on running Jeremy Hill, and it is an idea. Maybe one day we'll be able to put that into practice and make it happen. But a big thanks to you once again. And with that, it is time, heavens, for us to move on into the live chats, finally. Oh, never mind. Never mind. What do we got, Matthew?
This one goes to, wait, what? Who puts in a 10? He said, LSA rocks.
Hey, and we do. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And a big thanks to you for the support. Wait, what? For helping this channel to keep on running. And a big thanks to you so much once again. And we also have a $15 super chat from Blackbird9707. And he said, good work watching from Tasmania. You know what? Wait, what is from New Zealand? And you're from Tasmania. Guess what? We got the Anzacs here. And, you know, it's great. It's wonderful. And I got to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel rolling out here in the great old across the blue United States of America. Or as y'all call it down there, America. Well, actually, y'all don't call it that. Y'all call it the United States, I believe. But beyond there, A big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to finally get on to 3 live chat questions so we can round this thing out and sleep, or at least kind of chill before we sleep a little, you know. But with that, we're on to the 3rd to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Jam Fan. Thank you very much, Jam Fan, for that very nice question. I appreciate that very much. He said, you guys still think I'm crazy, but about World War III happening at the very least within the next 2 years.
I have to thank you greatly for the support, Jam Fam. And I do have to say that you are not crazy for believing that a 3rd World War would happen within the next couple of years. It is entirely likely, if not possible, that a world war could happen. But nevertheless, humanity must persist, and we must continue to keep on rolling and to keep on working hard to improve our nation and our sphere of influence. But I do thank you so much incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep running with your incredible questions and making sure to keep us on our toes. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the 2nd to last question of the night.
And the 2nd to last question is going to go to someone who's very special to me, Rotten Gunny. And thank you very much, Gunny. With Israel tied up in Syria, do you think we could see Iran or insert terror group here attack?
I've got to be honest with you, Ron and Gunny, real Ron and Gunny, like al-Baghdadi, like that wild general that I had that quit on me. He quit on me. Can't you believe that, folks? A general quitting on me. But beyond that, to answer your question, I think that we might end up attacking Iran eventually. I don't know when, I don't know where, because I might say we'll bomb them today, and then we don't bomb them tomorrow. Give them 2 weeks, and then we don't give them 2 weeks. We give them 1 year. I don't know. It's really hard to say. But beyond that, I got to thank you incredibly for asking a great question. And as far as answering your question, I have to be entirely honest with you. I don't know. I don't really know. I have no clue. I have a concept of a plan, but I have no clue what we're going to go with. It could be something. Get access on Signal, have them leak into the press, and then we'll know. But beyond that, a big thanks for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who supported this great channel, the greatest channel, the hugest channel, the biggest channel, people have said they've never seen a channel bigger. I just choked on spit, and it's totally true. The biggest channel, you just couldn't beat it. I'm telling you what. But beyond that, I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. You didn't even throw out any support. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm rambling. I got thrombosis. My blood vessels, they're doing something weird. I don't know what it's called, but it's thrombosis. It's kind of a funny word. But beyond that, I gotta thank you for the support.
Easy, Donald Duck. Keep secrets. You know, enigmas are just amazing.
Enigma is amazing.
Right, I would have to have more source footage to get that impression down, Pat. But unfortunately, we don't have any new source footage because the source is no longer with us. But you know,
what kind of stupid people keep asking about this Pepsi fella? Those sick people asking about Pepsi. They say, I want to know about Pepsi. What about that list? I say, what the hell's a list? I know that you got a list, but I don't know what the hell a list is. I've never heard of that word in my life. I don't know what y'all are talking about. You're absolutely lying. But, and also I saw Hokey Redneck saying, can Andrew move his hand? I'm moving them everywhere right now. I'm doing the pointing finger and the okay signs. That's how you have to do this voice. It's by law. You can't do it any other way. They are going to sue him. We're going to sue this shit. Bomb this shit. But anyways, I'm absolutely losing it at this point in the stream, folks. But anyways, with that, I hope that we answered that quite well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next super chat before we get to the final question of the night.
And Golfo Matt Elsay said, hoax. Hoax. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to James Green, who puts in a 20. And James said, cheers from North Florida. And thank you guys for all the coverage on Ukraine's fight for survival since the first attacks and the fundraisers for the soldiers and citizens that are suffering from the rat-faced Putin and the orcs.
And we are more than happy to do it, James Green. I got to thank you incredibly for the support from North Florida. And I got to thank you for really enjoying and appreciating what we've done here. And we've been able to do it as a community in the Lee Spring Army. And of course, long live Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And a big thanks to you for the support. And also, threw in a 20 as well and said, for your canceling sessions, enforcers. Oh, we don't need those. We just deal with them in silence. Sometimes I just stare at the wall. I think that works for me. But a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And Jeremy Vahill said, "Who is Pepsi? I've never heard of them. I've never heard of them either."
Pepsi bastard. Coca-Cola came in and Pepsi'd them.
All those people in Big Soda, the Big Soda lied about them. Those people, the CEO of Coca-Cola came up with this whole Pepsi hoax. Absolutely ridiculous. They said, release the secret formula. We're not releasing the secret formula. It never existed. Whatever you drank or thought you drank was not Pepsi. It was not Pepsi at all. They were absolutely lying. It was Diet Coke. Diet Coke, people. That's what we do. Thrombosis. Thrombosis. It hits you in the throm and the bosis. But beyond that, I hope that addresses that well, Jeremy Hill, and all of y'all super chats. Thank y'all for the support. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the final question of the night. Oh man, I'm telling you. So with that, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is going to go to none other than, let's see here. This one goes to, damn, my voice is hurting, by the way. I need some water so bad. That RFK impersonation, like, that is like, I see people like saying how uncannily accurate it is. And that's actually my voice, by the way. So and it really takes some contortion of the vocal cords to get that voice like that. I think I might damage it permanently and might sound like the fellow for long. But anyways, this one goes to Helen, who said, what happens when Muscovites find out what's really happening? They're going to rise up? They're going to sit down or what?
They're going to sit down and they're going to be really unhappy until they get starving. And then that's when they'll do something. So it really matters when they get starving. But for now, if they found out what was really going on, it wouldn't really change too much. So with that, I hope that does answer that question quite well. Like Marty K said it with, I'll tell you what, like Hank Hill from like King of the Hill. Boy, I tell you, Bobby, that boy ain't right. I tell you what. But beyond that, I got to thank you all once again for being here tonight. Me and Matthew were entirely honored with y'all's presence. I had to lose it here at the end of the stream, folks, because tonight was an incredibly long stream, and I'm mentally worn out. That was the longest news segment we've done in a hot minute, but it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes long or something. It was crazy. But beyond that, I got to thank you all so much for being here and enjoying the stream tonight. I've got to thank everyone who supported the channel, everyone who subscribed, everyone who was here. Everyone was here. We had 16,000 live viewers at the peak, and 130,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. A huge thanks to you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And if there's enough news to cover in the middle of the day, Matthew will be the one making the short war video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Granny, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again, and also bearing with us as we went a little bit bonkers here at the very end of it. Honestly, I've crashed hard from the caffeine. I started losing my train of thought there at the very end. But thank you all for joining us, all 130,000 plus people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will see you all tomorrow on the Short War video, because I have a feeling there probably will be enough news for one tomorrow, because things are getting a little bit crazy. So I will be seeing you midday tomorrow on that. And also, we'll both see you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next nightly War News stream. So be sure to join us for that. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hear 'em Slava, get some rest, and good night.